Because you've got powerful legs. How'd you get the physique? Was it gym or how'd you get the physique?
I've always been...
She's actually not got powerful legs. Do you shower in your dressing room? Do you have a shower on the day of a fight or not? Tell us about the tattoos.
Shut the fuck up, you little prick.
But then I've got the Phoenix.
Hey, prick.
So I'll take it from Bob every day of the week.
Absolute disgrace.
That's your knowing mind.
Move him out of here, Darren.
Ricky Hatton didn't go over for his fighter because he risked getting abducted and sold into sexual
I never said that.
Both have been rape victims. I'm not watching Frank Buglioni live on Saturday night. You're out of your mind.
Jesus Christ, get yourself a life.
He's actually a priest.
Yeah.
It's because his brother John Fury eye gouged him.
What have I told you all this time? He's going to end up sucked out, fucked out, looking for a handout.
Boxing nutters messenger group. I'm gonna be the king.
J-Pump. You know what I'm saying?
Welcome, folks, to the 592nd edition of the Boxing Asylum Nuthouse, a proud member of the Sports Social Network. You can find us everywhere you get your podcast on the Monday following the show, and you can catch us live on YouTube every Sunday evening, 8 o'clock in the UK, 12 p.m. in Pacific time here in the States. And also, if you join us up on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Boxing Asylum, there's all sorts of goodies on there in different levels. And also our good friend and still the proud owner, the whip cracker of the Boxing Asylum Nuthouse, Steve Wellington, will have near weekly little voice columns on there where he goes over the weekend, gives you his thoughts. And we know that he always gives some solid stuff there. That's why they now pay him for his work. He's one of those guys, an actual professional, unlike me, amateur that I am. But I'm joined by two real pros today, James and Des. Happy to have you guys there. It was an odd weekend in many ways, some bad decisions, some odd results as boxing is so inclined to serve up. And I'll tell you what, he is paying about 5-1, but Bertrand Murtazaliev, he could not give a damn what the odds maker said. He went in there and he just kicked Tim Zhu's ass. Put him down 4 times in 3 rounds. Zhu could not hold a punch whatsoever. His reflexes seemed dull. Des, I'll tell you what, Tim Zhu looked like a guy who wasn't ready to fight, and it makes me wonder about his outside the ring activities, because that kind of reflex dulling, that kind of inability to take a shot compared to what we just saw 6-7 months ago against Fondora, where he walked through the blood on his face to get to the final bell. I feel like there's something else going on with this guy, because this is night and day. I mean, I just saw the highlights, but that's not the same fighter that we've seen recently. Night and day.
Yeah, it was a big shock, and everyone was surprised, and we was all a little bit shocked with a mess around after Keith Thurman pulled out, Fondora came in, and Fondora beat Zhu. So this was really Prime's introduction and Prime's announcement that they signed this deal with Zhu, and the Fondora one was a mistake. Unfortunately, they've done something that's not uncommon in boxing. They just picked the wrong one. If I pronounce his name wrong, correct me, Matty. Is it Murtazaliev?
Yeah. We're in the ballpark.
Right. Well, Murtazaliev has just announced himself in the division. He's a top fighter, and we only saw him for a few minutes early as this morning, but that kid can fight, and it's really interesting with that part of the world. We look at the Olympic gold medalists and the world reps and the European champions at amateur level, and we look at the Russian national champions like the Bivals and the Baturbiyevs and these great Russian boxers that come off this fantastic production line of Russian amateur boxing. But we forget about the kids that come second or third or fourth. In such a huge country with such a high bar, you get the Murtazalievs. And I think that's what we've got here. We've got one, and the division's got one. And I think, look, perhaps let's just put Terence Crawford to one side for a minute. I think the whole division's on notice because that was a brilliant performance. He's got really sound fundamentals. He's very solid. He's got a fantastic left hook. Now look, all these things were made easy because Tszyu was so naive, and it's almost like Tszyu didn't understand that these guys are hitting your back, and you need a little bit of ring IQ. You need to show a few feints. You need to show some angles. You need to have a look. Now, Tszyu abandoned all of that. And I think we've got one. And I think the super welterweight, the light middleweight division has got one. I'm excited for what the future holds for this kid. I think he's very, very good. As for Tszyu, look, he's always been someone that was prepared to come out of his comfort zone. His resume is really good. He's always taken on challenges, and he's always been a game, brave fighter. But perhaps he's at a stage in his career, perhaps he's gone over that line now where you need to be a bit more than game and brave. You need to show us you've got a really good ring IQ. You need to spend a lot of time in the gym working on the subtle differences and the fundamentals that the guys at the top end of the sport have got. And I think that's probably the area that we saw Tszyu lacking last night. But no, I don't think it was a lucky punch type performance. I don't think it was a shock for anyone in the Murtazaliev camp. I think this guy's a real one. I'm really excited about what he does, and I think this will be the type of performance that might age well, depending on what Murtazaliev goes and does in the next 2 or 3 fights. It might actually begin to look quite good for Tszyu, depending on where he goes after this.
Yeah, let's see if he can get back on the right track. I mean, that was a tough one to watch, and I mean, everybody, I guess James can have an off night, but for your punch resistance to fade that much in less than a year, I still can't get over that, and I can't see him becoming a defensive wizard. Like if something changed with Tszyu, James. I mean, I think he's done at the top level because that was unbelievable. I mean, unless Murtazaliev is one of the most murderous punchers in the world, I have a hard time believing what has happened with Tszyu in these last couple fights.
Well, you never know what's going on outside the ring with professional fighters. There's a lot of profile, fame, attention, and that brings with it all sorts of problems. But I think this fight highlighted the aspect of profile versus ability, which I think happened in a few other fights on the UK card, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I've never watched too much of Tim Tszyu. I watched his fight against Tony Harrison. That really impressed me, that win. I thought he was really composed, and considering Tony Harrison's fights with Charlo and how well he did there, I thought that was a very good gauge of where he might be. But I can't say I've watched him forensically. And as I said to you guys earlier, I watched the highlights of this on my lunch break earlier today. And Murtazaliev just battered him, didn't he? It was just like, he just walked through him. So I'm at a bit of a loss as to where to place Tim Tszyu in my mind. Like, how good is he really? Is he as good as his profile suggests with the Prime deal and the TV deals, etc.? Obviously, his dad is a modern great in the sport, but how good is he? Like, is he one that we can expect to bounce back, or is it someone who was just kind of elevated and on the crest of a wave for a little bit, and now he's kind of dipping and finding his real level? I'm not really sure where to place him, to be honest.
I think in those situations, and everybody's different, there's always stories in boxing of those who have rebuilt, those who started out with a bunch of losses and were able to find their footing and how they did it for various reasons. But a lot of the times it's just in the how you lose. And Dez, I mean, like getting beaten and bloodied up by Fondora on late notice. I mean, that was rough, but I mean, you can find some cause in that one. But he was beaten and bloodied in that fight. And then you go to last night and he was just knocked around like a rag doll. Like I think the toughest thing for him to be able to come back isn't the fact that he's lost back-to-back fights. It's how he was defeated. It was almost just a downward trend of emasculation.
Yeah, but I think the defeat, the way he got beat, and the performance and almost the annihilation was because he got caught very early in the first round. And or was it the second round he got caught, Matty? He got caught very early in the fight.
He went down 3 times in the third and once in the or 3 times the second, once in the third.
Right, so he got caught early in the second round, and he never recovered. Now, on another fighter, we've seen fighters get dropped early in a fight, and they know how to look after themselves, they know how to hold, they know how to go for a walk, they know how to nullify the other kid, and they know how to stink the place out for 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 2.5 rounds, and get their senses back. Tszyu never had that wherewithal. He didn't know how to do that. And I think a lot of that comes from he's probably had it all his own way so far in his career. Now, look, James made the point. He has had some impressive wins, and he has climbed a reasonably steep mountain. He's taken on big challenges in terms of the Harrisons and the Jeff Horns. And I like the fights he's had, and I like the way he's dealt with people. I've been a Tim Tszyu fan. I still am. I just think he didn't know how to look after himself when he got hurt. Now, can a loss like this define you? Well, I watched John Ruiz get stopped in the first round by David Tua. He went all around the world, came back, and won a version of heavyweight championship.
Yep. And he went on to stink out the boxing world for more than a decade after.
But you can come back from this. You can, one defeat shouldn't write you off. But he was in there with a very good fighter, and I don't think Tim Tszyu knew how good he was until he was in there with him. This was a very good performance. It was an elite performance by the kid, and that, I mean, if you look around that division now, whether it's Madrimov or Ortiz or Baranchuk, I think they'd all be taking notice now of Murtazaliev and say, is this a kid that we want to get in there with, or do we want to let him have 1 or 2 more just to make sure he's the real deal or he's not? But looking at last night, I think he's the real deal. I think he's a very good kid from a very good region, a good part of the world. He's probably got a very good pedigree. And what I saw last night was a very good, solid operator. And he dismantled Tszyu. But Tszyu didn't help himself.
No, that's the rough thing for him is that God. But I'll tell you what, Des, this is where I know you say like he got a punch, but he didn't recover. But even like when I'm catching the little bits early and stuff, it's like he wasn't quite with it. Like his reflexes weren't there. I didn't like the way he was keeping his guard. He was, he's not a lot of up and down and head movement kind of guy, but he was so static, so stiff. Like it was just, I don't know. He looked off basically from the opening bell.
Yeah, he did. And the best way I can describe last night's performance was it all went wrong for Tszyu in one quick burst of 6 to 9 minutes. It just went wrong for him. And he'd done everything wrong and he didn't know how to respond. Look, I use John Ruiz as an example against David Tua. I could give you Lennox Lewis against Oliver McCall. I've seen great fighters get stopped very early in fights and come back. I'm not saying Tim Tszyu is a great fighter. I'm saying the other kid is a very good fighter and probably better than Tim Tszyu. This fight, this result, it might age well for Tim Tszyu because I happen to think that Murtazaliev is going to go on and do good things in boxing. From what I saw last night, it's only a short clip. We only saw him for 2.5 rounds, but I think that kid's the real deal. I think Tim Tszou's a good fighter, and last night don't change that. But I think he does have to go back and work on things. I think he has got them little nuances that I talked about. That when you go past a certain point in boxing, when you go past the line, you have to think about, right, how can I be cuter? What can I do to make sure that I know how to survive in rough moments, in tough times? Can I feint more? Can I use angles? Can I be subtle? Can I pace change? And I think Tszou's got to start learning them little tricks, because what's got him this far looks like it won't get him much further. So he has to change something.
Yeah, and he's 29 now. I'd forgotten that he's just kind of kind of become a man before our eyes.
But Matty, he's 29 that's lived a charmed life. He's not had a hard life, has he?
Yeah, but he's had some ring miles at this point in time, though.
Yeah. But I would argue that those miles are good for him. I don't think Tszou's shot. I don't think he's shot worn. I think he come across a good kid last night. I think Murtazaliev is going to go on to do things. That performance showed me, but just the way he set his feet, the way he held his hands, the way he put his punches together, and all the things Tszou done wrong. Tszou didn't know how to cope when he was in the eye of the storm. Tszou learned an awful lot from that defeat last night. He won't feel like it now, but he's amassed an awful lot of information of what I don't do when I get caught, how I don't fight when I'm hurt. But it's now past that now. He's got to rebuild and come again. In short answers now, because I don't want to overtalk one kid more than the other. Tszou, you come across a good kid. You got well beat, but you're not the first fighter to get well beat. You've just got to learn the nuances in boxing that take you from being where you are now to probably where you want to get close to. Murtazaliev, I think he's a very good fighter, and I think he's put a lot of people in that division on notice.
Yeah, it's interesting. So this is obviously before the fight last night, I believe. Ring ratings at 154. 1, they have Terence Crawford. 2, Israel Madrimov. Then Fondora, Virgil Ortiz. There was Tim Tszou, Sergey Bahuchik, Jesus Ramos, Charles Conwell, who's kind of a dark horse in the division, to be honest with you. Brian Mendoza, I think we've seen his ceiling. Then number 10, we had Murtazaliev. I mean, if you look at that division right there, I tell you what, that's a lot of killers, and that's a hard division to rebuild yourself in.
It is. I totally agree with that point. Yeah, that's a hard division. But just out of interest, you said Murtazaliev was 10 last night. Where is he now, by any chance?
I have no idea. They won't. Yeah, they won't change the rankings for a while. But you'd have to think that makes him a top 5, and it's
absolutely. Not just the win itself, but how he done it. It was a really good performance. It was a really good. It was. I keep using heavyweight references, don't I? It was Michael Bent, Tommy Morrison type performance. It come out of nowhere. But I think he's a player in the division, and you're right to say that it's a division of real good fighters.
Yeah, a lot of interesting matches to be made there. But James, it'll be interesting here. It sounds like at the end of January, they're going to be doing Sebastian Fondora against Errol Spence. Errol Spence, by that point in time, will be about 18 months since he's been in the ring, and he's getting a shot at these 154-pound belts that Fondora has. But you talk about a guy who's coming off of an ass kicking and see how he's going to look. Errol Spence getting a crack at all those belts right off the bat, that's a reach. But Fondora is going to have a chance to cement himself in this division, and if he does, man, there's so many good fights out there to be made. Do you have any thoughts on that fight? I mean, it's a few months out, but this division is getting hot under right before our very eyes.
I do have some thoughts on that fight, but you mentioning Fondora there, it makes me think about Tim Tszou and his management team. I don't know who handles him, but if you go through a hard fight against Fondora and then you get bloodied and it's a tough fight, you end up losing. Do you rebuild against Murtazaliev, I'm looking at his record now. It's looking a little bit like when they brought over Breedis Prescott to fight Amir Khan. It's like 22-1 or is it 22-0 and 16 KOs or something like that? Do you rebuild against that guy? Do you know what I mean?
They're trying to get him in for a title real quick, and it's just they picked the wrong dude. You're right.
And Prime have to justify the money they're paying to Zoo, don't they? I mean, they're trying to get a balance. I mean, listen, they brought Sergey Kovalev over from Nathan Cleverly. Some of these network bosses, and they make mistakes, and we saw that again last night, James. Like they thought I can't pronounce his name.
Murtazaliev,
the Russian kid. They thought he was the one to make Tazoo look good. They just got it wrong, and like there'd be TV executive James thinking, okay, we want to bring someone that can punch him back, and someone that's going to give us a few rounds, and someone that's going to springboard this new project of ours, which is Tim Tazoo on Amazon Prime. They didn't realise they was picking the wrong one. This was Bone Crusher Smith being brought over for Frank Bruno. This was like Marvin Hagler being brought over for Alan Minter. This was the wrong one. And like we're all surprised here, but imagine what them TV execs and promoters are like. They can't believe what they've just seen.
Yeah, they'll be sick to their stomachs, man. I mean, no, you're right. Those are good comparisons. You can never guarantee the rebuilding project, can you? But I know, I'm glad that we've seen like a little bit of a surprise, because sometimes these cards can be a little bit predictable. And with Murtazaliev, with that performance, like his future fights start to look exciting. As for the Fondora fight, Matty, against Errol Spence, Errol Spence is always a concern, having been in that car crash, and just the way he fights in the pocket, taking shots, slipping plenty and blocking. But it's kind of a high impact style, even though he's managed to dominate a lot of people with that style. But what Terence Crawford did to him was like serious. That was like a technical beatdown. And I think he struggles to make 147. And now I think the move up is good for him, but you don't know how much he's depleted himself through making that lower weight for such a long time. Added the car crash, added the beatdown from Crawford. I wouldn't say it's a given that Errol Spence is going to win, but you'd like to back him, because him on his best night is something good to watch, man.
Well, I think he had the detached retina too, which is why they canned the fight with Pacquiao originally, and then they stuck old Ugas in there, who ended up beating Pacquiao. Yeah. So he's got a lot of things going on there, and it's I don't know. That ass kicking he took was nasty, and I think Errol, I mean, he's not a young man anymore. Let's see, I got him. It's a shame BoxRec doesn't have his age on there. I think he's 35 or 36. He's a little bit younger than Bud. He was born in 1990. Okay, so he's 34, going to be 35 next year. But it's been a rough time for him, and I don't know. But I'll tell you what, you mentioned that you brought up something good when it comes to Zoo's management. So let's talk about Zoo's management and what they've done this year. All right. First off, they had a fight planned with a known quantity in Keith Thurman, bringing up a welterweight who can't really take it too well to the body. He's known. He's got not a great resume, but a very good resume at welterweight when you take a look at it. So that was a good move. But he has to pull out 2 weeks from the fight. Who do they replace him with? A 6'5" southpaw. Well, that was a stupid move, and it didn't pay off. He lost that fight. And then they bring him back against this hard-punching Russian who everybody has seemingly avoided. You go through his resume and you think, there's not much on there other than Kolke. It seems to me like people have been avoiding him like the plague as far as it goes. So Zoo's management team is not good. At this, I kind of wonder what's going on at PBC. Apparently, Al Heyman's health is not in good shape. This thing with Amazon has been terrible. The next event that I think that they have planned is Gervonta Davis against Lamont Roach Jr. And what are they doing with these two fighters from like kind of the Baltimore, DC area? Oh, they're going to bring them to Houston, Texas to fight. I don't know what's going on over there at the PBC, but this Amazon thing is not going well. These pay-per-view cards are not the typical solid fare that they've offered. And thank God this was a free option for those who were able to check it out. It just came with your Prime, because not much to speak of. There was supposed to be a really good undercard fight on there as well with another cat from Australia. He's actually a Mexican fighting out of Australia, if I recollect. Cesar Mateo Tapia ended up in a draw with Endry Saavedra. Tapia ended up going down 3 times himself. Saavedra went down once. People are saying Saavedra might have gotten the rough end of it, so I might check that out. Yoenis Tejas, who is definitely worth watching as far as prospects go. He beat the 35-3 Johan Gonzalez. Sounds like he is well on his way there as well. I might have to catch those when I get a chance. But yeah, the story was definitely Tim Tszyu. But then we hop on. Go ahead. Did you want to say something before we hopped away, Des?
Yeah, I just like that. Right, so the way you just said about Tim Tszyu's career and the management of it, you could argue that he's been managed pretty well because, remind me, Matty, because your knowledge might be better than mine on Tim Tszyu's career, but he's fought Jeff Horn, he's fought Dennis Hogan, he's fought Tony Harrison. Did he fight Brian Mendoza as well?
Yeah, he fought Mendoza.
Yeah. Did he fight Gausha as well? G-A-U.
He fought Gaucher in his first fight in America. Yep.
Now we've seen Gaucher's a good fighter. To go over to America and fight Gaucher, that's a test. I mean, you wouldn't see many British kids doing things like that. So that's a test. And I didn't think Fondora would catch Tszyu out before they matched it. I thought Tszyu would have enough for that, and he did lose on a split. And you also have to assume that with Tszyu being the former Soviet Union #1 rep, former Soviet soldier, former amateur world champion, and Hall of Fame world champion in the pros, you'd have thought he would have a few spies or a few people coming back to him telling him a little bit about this Russian kid, and they must have fancied it. But sometimes you can just wake up a monster, or someone can turn up the very best version of themselves and say, I've been given the best opportunity I've ever been given in my life, and I'm going to grab it with both hands. And I think Murtazaliev did that last night. And I always go back on these old ones because that's probably my generation. But if I told you that Marvin Hagler, they fancied him in the Mickey Duff camp. They thought, let's bring Marvin over because he was hit and miss against Vito Antrofermo. And Alan Minter's beaten Antrofermo. So let's bring Marvin over. He'll be one that makes us look good, and Alan will beat him. But they didn't realise they was waking up this monster called Marvin Hagler, who would have a near 10-year decade of dominance against and become one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Sometimes, Matty, yes, you get it wrong, but you just give someone opportunity and they take it with both hands. And I think that's what we saw last night.
Yeah, I guess we'll see in their next choice. I think they have to look at 2025 has to be seen as a rebuilding year for Tszyu. They might have to.
And let me ask you this, Matty.
Sure.
If Murtazaliev goes on to beat Madrimov and Baranchuk, what do you say then? It doesn't look like such a bad loss, does it? It's still a bad loss, but it don't look like such a bad loss as what it does now, does it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're losing to a quality fighter, I mean, you lose to a quality fighter. I think it's the fact it was so fast, so quick,
correct,
so definitive. Yeah. It's not like you can look back and say, "Oh, I lost a split decision to this guy who went on and beat Madrimov." He
got his ass handed to him. Absolutely,
yeah. That's rough.
But could you imagine if this Russian kid goes and beats Madrimov? Could you imagine if in the fight after Madrimov, it goes and beats Virgil Ortiz? Now, all of a sudden, Tszyu it's not so bad on Tim Tszyu, is it? All of a sudden, it's like, well, you know what? If we can rebuild Tim Tszyu with a couple of wins, Tszyu's back in the picture again. I think the next 6 to 8 months will tell us an awful lot on both of these kids.
I was going to say maybe the best move is to move him up to 160 because it's pretty devoid of talent, in many ways. You got a few guys up there and then it's basically empty beyond them. But, one thing that I also noticed, though, is Murtazaliev just looked freaking huge next to Tszyu, too.
He did look big, he did look big, yeah.
And I mean, Zoo always looks, pretty stout. He's not one of the tallest in the division, but he's broad. He's he's muscular. So I don't know. That's what's tough is like, so if you rebuild yourself, who are you looking at fighting? I don't know if Terrence Crawford's going to be around the division much longer. I think he is either going to retire or keep trying to add to his, his career resume accomplishments. So maybe that belt comes vacant, but I wouldn't want to have a rematch with Murtazaliev if I was him, at least not without a couple of tune-up fights, try to figure this stuff out a little bit more. Madrimov
I don't think Ortiz, Madrimov, any of them guys, Fondora, Brandon Adams, any of them, I don't think any of them fancy Murtazaliev in their next one, because everybody wants to see how good is this kid, is he the real deal, and was last night an anomaly? Was it a bit of a freak, or is this guy going to be consistent? Is he as good as we think he could be? So I think you'll struggle to match this Russian kid, but I think once he gets going, I think he's going to kick a few doors open.
Yeah. I'm more excited to see what Murtazaliev's 2025 looks like than Tim Zoo's. Yeah. So I mean, I'll tell you what. Like, if you talk about like stock up, stock down kind of thing, like Zoo's stock was really high at the beginning of this year. I mean, it's plummeted. He's got to come back, and I think go back to Australia, fight your typical fare. And try to make find your confidence again and retool. Maybe he needs a different trainer. He might not be learning what he needs to learn, but I don't know. We'll see. I didn't like anything I saw from him in the ring that day, or in what I saw. So, but anyhow, we do have some stuff to talk about from the UK as well. It was. I'll tell you what, this one was a little bit of a controversial decision as well, with Dan Aziz losing a decision to Lewis Edmonson. Edmonson had a point deduction, was doing a lot of moving, a lot of single shotting. I think it was a close fight. I don't even know if I want to call this one a robbery, but I think, it's, if all things being equal, I would think that given the action in the ring, I would think it was probably you'd probably say Aziz wins that fight 9 times out of 10.
Do you recall, we probably don't because we spoke about this only briefly, but we spoke about this last week at the very end of the show, and I said this could be a difficult fight for Dan. Purely because Lewis is young, fresh, 9-0. He sells a ticket. He's got a good management team behind him that are really pushing him. And we saw Dan get beat by Joshua Buatsi 2 fights back. And we saw him arguably lose at Sellers Park on the Riakporhe Billam Smith undercard. And I said that this is going to be one Dan's got to look good in. But he's going to have to be up for it. And he's going to have to be very, very proactive and very assertive. Now, after the first 2 or 3 rounds, it was clear that Lewis Edmonson didn't want to engage. It was all about not getting hit. And that's where I think Dan let himself down a bit, because he didn't force the issue. He didn't say to Lewis, you might not want to get hit, son, but you've never been at this level. You've never done this distance. And I'm a former British, Commonwealth or European champion. And I'm going to show you what it's like to be in deep water. And at that point, Dan Aziz should have drowned Lewis Edmonson. They should have taken him into a very, very dark place. But Dan didn't. Now, I still find the scores bizarre, because I had Dan winning and Lewis Edmonson got a point deducted. But it can't be a robbery when it's nip and tuck and quite close. But I was surprised by the scores. I'm disappointed for Dan Aziz. I don't quite like the way he's been managed the last year or so. I think there'll be plenty of fighters, maybe a Ben Whittaker or a Anthony Yarde in the same division with the same promoter that might have thrown back a few opponents and said, look, we don't want that one. I want someone who's going to make me look good. Someone's going to allow me to get me punches off. Someone's going to come to fight. But maybe Dan's not got the financial security them other guys have got. And maybe Dan's had to take what he's been given. But I'm disappointed the last year Dan's had. I think he's had a hard last year. The Buatsi fight I don't think was necessary, but I understand why he took it. I didn't like the fight with the Croatian at Sellers Park. That was hard work, and we didn't need that one. And Lewis Edmondson was probably all wrong for Dan in terms of bringing Dan back and making Dan look good last night, and it done the opposite. I've got my own feelings about Dan Aziz now. I'm absolutely convinced that seeing he's now trained with Martin Bowers, knowing the relationship Martin and his brother Tony have with Frank Warren and Queensbury, I'm actually coming of the way of thinking that that's possibly Dan's last fight with Boxer, and he'll go over to Queensbury now and we'll work with Frank. I think that might suit Dan better. I'm not quite sure that Boxer's been good for Dan Aziz. I think it looks to me that they've allowed him to win titles so that they're more favourable light heavyweights can win them off him. I don't think Dan's been treated particularly well by Boxer. I think he's had to work really hard for his opportunity. I think Dan Aziz is going to go over to Queensbury now, and I think that's where you'll see Dan Aziz for the next couple of years. But in terms of the fight last night, no arguments. It was a nip and tuck fight. It was close. I had Dan winning, but no arguments. Dan didn't help himself. And I'd like to draw a line under it now if you're Dan Aziz and look for the next 2 or 3 years of his career with his new training team and potentially a new promoter.
Yeah, he's, what I liked about him is just he kind of just does good, honest work in the ring. And that's where Edmonson got him, though, is that everything Edmonson does kind of just looks flashy. And someone who knows all about flash and flare, Mr. Amon Khan.
Who? It's not me.
What?
Must be talking about someone else. Flash and flare, me.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't you go out of the house wearing like fuchsias and other bright colors? No.
Go out of the house.
Oh yeah, that's right. You don't even leave the house.
House.
You don't even leave the box in the alley.
Hey, how you doing, mate?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, man. I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
Dragging myself into this Sunday, but happy to be on the asylum as per usual. Matty steering the ship. Don't know which way he's steering the ship, but steering the ship
right into the rocks, sir. Right into the rocks. So, but anyways, what'd you think of that? The scorecards with Aziz and Edmonson. Did you think robbery, fair? Just could have gone either way.
Can't really give you a full reflection on it, to be honest with you, because I was working the fight night, and when you're working, you're kind of in and out. You're chasing around, trying to grab a few interviews. You're talking to a couple of people in and around ringside, or you're watching from the entrance to the media part where some fighters are congregated. So you're kind of getting into conversations with other people. So it was.
What was their feeling then? What was kind of the general feeling of the folks in the that attended?
There wasn't honestly. So I only really saw about 3 rounds of the fight, and from what I saw, it looked pretty close. So that's about as much as I can say to it. I sort of feel on the other side where maybe Des kind of feels like Box haven't done a great opportunity, done great by Aziz in matching him tough. But maybe Aziz and his team have done well to navigate those choppier waters and get the spotlight that he's not had on his career, and it's come later on in his career. I made the comparison that Dan Aziz is sort of like a 90s intercontinental champion, where they get that big push for a little bit, and then there's transitional for someone else to pick up the mantle and push on for them to then get made. And that's what it sort of feels like for Dan right now.
I feel like he's kind of like a poor man's Glenn Johnson, and Glenn Johnson was already a poor man's Glenn Johnson, kind of. So,
well, I mean, Dan's a good second half to a fight in the light heavyweight mix. He'll always find himself as a good second half to anyone domestically, and he'll be in fights where he can win as well too. I think the Boaty fight, like I imagine for Dan, put myself in his shoes, he would have probably thought this fight wouldn't have never came for him, so he had to take it. He had to take that fight. I asked him in the build up to this fight week as well too, like, you know, that set fight, was that the full reflection of yourself? And he made no excuses. He says it was the full reflection of me on that night. He gave about as much as he could do on that night. But he would give more of a better account of himself. And I just think Louis Edmondson is just a real awkward not great sort of style for TV or even for fighters like Aziz. And he, walks away with the British title here. I'm not sure if that was like the plan from Boxer at all. And I remember was it towards the start of this year? Edmonson was kind of really pushing for the Whittaker fight. It was the back end of last year. It was in Bournemouth as well too, wasn't it? He was really pushing for that Whittaker fight, and that gets a little bit more of a shine now because Edmonton, with that British title, can really call out Ben Whittaker whilst Ben Whittaker stocks down. But yeah, Louis Edmondson kicks on. Aziz has got to regroup and come back, which I think he will. 36 years old, I believe he is, but he's. I don't think he particularly shows any signs of wear and tear. There's still like life in Aziz. He's just got to. They've got to match him well because he's sort of on the edge of the cliff at the moment.
Did you hear my point, Ames, about maybe Dan going over to Queensbury? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, for Frank to now pick him up off the back of a draw and a loss, it's not. I don't know if I don't particularly think they'll sign him, but more have him on their shows as opposed to sign him. He'll have to earn a promotional deal, I believe, if that was his last.
My thinking, Ames, is I know Frank's got a really good relationship with Martin and Tony, and I see Martin's now training Dan. And if Martin's training Dan, probably Martin and Tony are managing him. I don't know that, by the way, but Martin's definitely training Dan. And Martin's got Denzel Bentley in the gym, and Dan and Denzel are mates. So I wouldn't be surprised if Frank or Martin have said, look, can we see the Boxer thing out? And can we get Dan over to Queensbury? And I think if you've got these 5v5 things happening between Queensbury and Matchroom out in Saudi or in the near future, I think Dan could be a player in that little mix because there's plenty of light heavies you could match him with. And perhaps Dan's come to a stage now where he's got to say, look, I'm past British titles, I'm past Commonwealth titles. I'm now just an independent light heavy that's going to fight perhaps your Craig Richards or your Willie Hutchinsons or maybe even an Anthony Yarde, depending how they do it. But for me, Ames, something you touched on earlier when I said that, I think he's been matched harder. I think they matched Dan Aziz accordingly so that he could pick up titles and then put him in with a Buatsi or potentially even a Whittaker down the line. And if they had any visions of signing Anthony Yarde, then maybe they could put Anthony Yarde in with him. And I don't think they've ever had full belief in Dan Aziz, Boxer. I think they've always just used him as someone to pick up a belt so they could give him to their main light heavy. I might be wrong when I say that, but that's what it looks to me.
No, I get that take. As well. I do feel like Dan's got to kind of look a little bit further down the chain, and maybe someone like Willie Hutchinson's looking to pick back off of a defeat to Buatsi. Maybe they're pitching Willie versus Dan Aziz and have that at light heavy. Or maybe sort of Dan tries to position himself. I know he's just lost at British level. I think Shakan Peters is in for the European, and if they can make that fight, if Peters comes through it, maybe go for that. It's a domestic fight at European level. But I think like we mentioned, it's got to be matched carefully. Dan has got a lot of goodwill towards Dan, so I want to see him I want to see him kind of climb that ladder again.
And when I see the job that Frank's done with his mate Denzel Bentley in terms of how he's brought his career back and how he's kept his word with Denzel and how the management and the promotion and the training situations all really worked well for Frank Warren and Denzel Bentley. And he's in a good place now, Denzel. And we often see Denzel not just as a boxer, we see him working in the studios or he's behind the mic. I think you have to go a long way to find a more engaging, articulate, charming, charismatic fighter than Dan Aziz. I think he's got all them qualities. I think he's quite a very endearing person. So I think a conversation might have been had. Look, I might be wrong, but don't be surprised if you see Dan Aziz now working with Queensbury. I just think it looks like a very good natural fit, considering he's now working with Martin and Tony and at the Peacock. I think it could be a natural fit for Dan. I don't think, the bottom line is, Ames, I don't think boxer's really been good for Dan Aziz. Although he's had some good fights and earned some money, I don't think that I don't think Dan's been their main focus.
Who would you pick in a fight between Zach Parker and Dan Aziz?
Oh God, that's a good fight. Yeah, I'm going to say Dan Aziz because I think he's been more active, and I think he might have learned from his mistakes. But it's a hard fight for Dan. I mean, every fight at this level is a hard fight for Dan Ames. Like, I think Willie Hutchinson's a hard fight. Anthony Yarde's a hard fight. I think Spider Richards will be a hard fight. Lyndon Arthur would be a hard fight. Because Dan's that mid-range at everything. He's mid-range pace, mid-range power, mid-range IQ. So he's like a 6.5 to 7.5 in every department. He's very workmanlike. So I think you said the Intercontinental Champion, right? He's one of them type of guys. But I liken him to a Dennis Andrews or a Clinton Woods. So the one thing I would say about Dan Aziz is you're a 6.5 to 7.5 in so many attributes and qualities. But you must work harder, Dan. You must force your fight. You must impose yourself on fighters. You must be more proactive. And you must take fighters because he's very strong. And Dan can dismantle you from the waist up. But he's got to impose himself. And for the last 3 or 4 fights, I've not seen Dan really impose himself. But that might be because he's come up in level. And it does, it's like a goal scorer. You go to a point where you stop scoring goals. Maybe Dan's got to a point in boxing where he can stop imposing himself. But I think the guys we just spoke about there, Ames, they're all hard fights for Dan Aziz.
Well, hopefully we can stick Dan Aziz up front in the number 9 shirt for Watford because none of our strikers score any goals.
A lot of interesting fights have been discussed there. But James, I'll tell you, when he mentioned Edmonson against Ben Whittaker, I tell you what, I don't like that fight. Why? Because I think that's a winnable fight for Whittaker, because I don't think Edmonson brings the things to the table from what we, from what we saw last night that make Whittaker, fold under pressure and jump out of the ring. It would basically be a fight, or not a fight. It would be a boxing match of athleticism, and I think Whittaker wins that fight based on athleticism because that is the contest. What do you think, James?
Well, to be honest, watching the highlights, they showed Edmonson pretty much, well, not dominating the fight, but definitely getting the best of it. He looked huge as well compared to Aziz, which is something, I'm not used to seeing. And he looked like he was switch hitting quite a lot. So I get what you mean. That kind of, it's almost like an interpretive style, isn't it? Like what Edmonson and Whittaker do. But judging from watching Whittaker struggle with an opponent who was willing to kind of absorb his shots and just throw straight back, and see him suffer a little bit in them circumstances, I would wonder against someone as big as Edmonson, and who was, he got deducted a point, I think it was in the 8th, for shoving down on Aziz's neck and digging in a body shot. So he's capable of the rough stuff as well. I don't know. I don't think that's a good matchup for Whittaker, to be honest with you. But then, his ankle injury, it might be something that stays with him for a while. If your calling card is mobility and foot movement and changing of direction and all that good stuff, there's no telling how much this injury could affect him moving forward. So I wouldn't say that's an easy win for Whittaker by any means, to be honest.
I don't know. What are your early thoughts on that fight, Des? Do you also kind of disagree with my athleticism on athleticism belief?
Ask me the question again, Matty. Are you asking me about Whittaker versus Edmonson?
Yes.
Yeah, Whittaker takes him apart, in my opinion. I think,
as long as his ankle heals. I don't know. I had a hard time with that one, James. I'm like, I don't know about if there's an ankle injury to really speak of. I just can't buy it still.
That might be true. But I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, man, because it was a bit of a weird thing tumbling out the ring like that. And he did look like he was suffering in there. But, man, I don't know. He could have landed weird. I'm not there, innit? So I'll just have to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not in any position to be calling professional fighters quitters or saying they're looking for a way out. Even though that it didn't look as if the impact of the fall was that severe. But again, I'm not in his shoes, so I have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
You're a good Christian.
I think Liam Cameron beats Lewis Edmonton. I think Spider Richards beats Lewis Edmonton. I mean, the Lewis Edmonton I saw last night, bless him, he put in a sort of performance that I'd expect to see someone winning an area belt. Now, that's not to put Lewis Edmonton down. I think sometimes boxers, they look through their career and go, there's one result that really still, sticks in my craw. I think Denzel Bentley will always, kick himself for letting Nathan Heaney beat him. And I think Dan Aziz would always kick himself now for letting last night get away from him. Dan had to win 2 or 3 rounds solid and strong, and in the early stages of last night's fight, and it would have put Lewis in a box. In terms of it would have nullified. Let me rephrase that. It would have put Lewis in a corner where he says, you know what, I can't compete with this kid. But he didn't, and Dan allowed Lewis to fiddle and nick and pinch. And Dan wasn't proactive enough. He wasn't assertive enough. But I don't think Liam Cameron would let Lewis get away with that. I don't think Spider Richards would get Lewis get away with all that. And if you go above them guys in terms of Anthony Yarde or Buatsi, no, they're not even in the same class. Lewis Edmond got away with one last night. I don't know how many defences he gets at his British title. But going in 9-0 against someone like Dan Aziz, who's been around Europe, won titles abroad, won and defended British titles, and was probably one that I think he was the first light heavy that was potentially going to own that Lonsdale belt in 40 years. The last one being Crawford Ashley. I think Dan's going to kick himself, but it is what it is, and good luck to Lewis. But I don't think there'd be a lot of light heavies in the top end of the British domestic rankings. I think Lewis is one we've got to stay away from.
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed with him. I thought that he was kind of a domestic level stylist. That I guess if I had to cast a kind of a broad style over him, et cetera, that's what I would say. I don't know what made you think of that fight there, Ames, and what way do you think it would go?
No, look, I think it's too easy to, whilst Whittaker's stuck down, to write him off and make the memes and make the easy jokes on Whittaker and kind of write him off in fights. I don't think that was a full reflection of Ben in that fight. And like has been said by James as well here, and I've said it as well too, got to give him the benefit of the doubt with what happened there. Not going to be the one to point the finger at him and call him a quitter. But that's got to be followed through, and the immediate fight for Ben Whittaker is a rematch with Liam Cameron. No Louis Edmondson's, no whatever down the chain or anything else or warm-up fights. You go straight into that rematch with Liam Cameron when you're fit and healthy. And Frank Warren should be pushing for that off the gate. If Whittaker's out for a little bit of time, just time Liam Cameron's next fight so he gets a bit more experience in the ring off of his own comeback, and then make sure he's free for whenever Whittaker's free, and then have that rematch as immediate as you can make it. But no, look, I would back. Although Louis Edmondson is from he's been around the Sheffield gyms, hasn't he? He's managed by Billy Joe Saunders, sort of in the same sort of way that Liam Cameron had that style scouted because of what he's experienced in the past. Louis will have had a considerable taste of that as well too, so that plays kind of in his factor as well in that fight. But look, Whittaker is a brilliant talent who had a really bad night on that night, and I would still back him to beat Edmondson if it was the full version of Whittaker in the ring and full version of Edmondson too.
And sorry, Matty, on that note, mate, Ames is right there. On that note, I should congratulate Lewis because he's the new British and Commonwealth light heavyweight champion. It's a wonderful achievement going in on your 10th fight. So congratulations to Lewis. But if he's going to build a career and if he's going to defend those belts, I think we'll have to see a bit more on what we saw last night. But certainly, congratulations to the kid. He done very well last night.
Yeah, in your 10th fight, that's a hell of an achievement. You know, and even if you don't think he won, to be in a close fight with a fighter like Aziz is impressive. You know, and I'm not saying he's a poor fighter, but I think he is definitely a domestic level fighter who gives guys at the top, you know, kind of borderline European level a tough night, depending on the evening and the styles. Let's see here. Also, last night, Adam Azim taking out O'Hara Davies in 8 rounds. Davies going down twice, once in the 5th, the other in the 8th. His corner was getting ready, I think, to throw in the towel as the ref was counting there. It was not a good night for Davies. He could not get his footing. But you know what? I'm going to say I'm going to say this, James. People could say a lot of negative things about Davies, but I'm going to say he might have lost, but he wins most improved. He went 7 more rounds than he did against Ismael Barroso.
Well, I think O'Hara Davies is he's like a well of untapped potential. I feel like he's got all the components to be a very good fighter, but I think that Josh Taylor fight ruined him, man. I think it put a dent in the confidence that he was building at that point. And you know, he looked pretty good in. I think it was a bounce back win against Farrell. I think he dropped him like 6 times and looked destructive again. But it's been topsy turvy ever since, and switching trainers and, you know, taking shock defeats. And I don't know. It's I always think about what could have been with O'Hara Davies, because even against Dan Azim, there were moments where, you know, the jab was so long, so straight, and it was pinging his head back a little bit. But then there were other times where he looked hesitant, and, you know, he'd throw a punch and you could see halfway towards delivering it, he was already thinking about getting out of there. He was always caught in 2 minds and always overly conscious of potentially taking a shot, which obviously he took plenty of. The finishing punch especially was pretty impressive. But yeah, O'Hara Davies, unrealised potential. But with Adam Azim, it's like I've got similar questions about how far he can go and what his ceiling is. When it comes to young, highly touted prospects coming through the McGuigan gym, the ceiling is usually pretty high.
Yeah, and this is a guy, Desrai, I would definitely say, I mean, he's clearly made it known that he competes, you know, at the domestic and probably even the European level at this. He might not have very many fights under his belt, but Azim is kind of knocking on the door of a world title opportunity at this point. Do you think he has that level of talent in a pretty solid 140-pound division?
Yeah, it's a solid division, and it's very early days for Adam. He's still a baby. He's young. I think it was 12-0. He's a reasonable puncher, but he's not beaten many top kids, and he's not fought any punchers. O'Hara's probably his best win, and there's a ceiling to O'Hara. I think Adam's a talented kid. He's got incredibly good feet and incredibly fast hands. I've not seen hands that fast for a long time. He's very fast, and I'd like to see what happens when someone boxes Adam that has got a good high ring IQ. So last night we saw O'Hara trying to counterpunch Adam Azim. I don't know why they went that way, because how's O'Hara going to counterpunch such a fast fighter? And as we saw, O'Hara's counterpunch wasn't fast enough. O'Hara's got this wide stance, and he has his lead left hand sort of swinging by his hip, and he likes to arch over a counter hook, a long counter hook. But Adam was in jab 1-2 and out, and O'Hara was left to miss that shot. So the way to get to someone like Adam Azim is to punch with him. I mean, if you want to know how to beat Adam Azim, go and look at Danny Garcia and Amir Khan. You have to punch with these guys because they're so fast. They're blistering fast. You stand in front of them and you throw straight shots as they come in. That's how you counter them guys. You don't try and catch them after they've punched. So I think O'Hara had his tactics wrong last night, but I understand, you know, there's a ceiling to O'Hara, and that's why they picked O'Hara. O'Hara was there to make Adam look good, and he did just that. Adam could be very pleased with himself last night. It was a good performance. It was a good win, but we're still not seeing enough of Adam Azim to know how far he goes. But just on his hand speed, his feet, the team he's got around him, what's been said about him, Adam Azim can look forward to a good future in boxing. I think he's going to have a good career, but perhaps it's a bit early to suggest talking about world titles or even upend at European level. But I certainly think we're going to get a few fun nights out of Adam Azim before he crosses that line and goes up to the next level. But it ain't just yet. He's still very young, and he's only had 12 fights.
Ames, where are you going to be steering Adam Azim if you were in charge of his next fight or two?
I think he's got time on his side. I don't think there's any rush to take on this Dalton Smith fight. Look, Dalton Smith is a number of years older than Adam Azim. Is there really that push for that fight? I mean, let me knock this back to you, Matty. Are you really wanting? Are you at the edge of your seat for Adam Azim versus Dalton Smith right now?
I think if you want to make a reasonably interesting fight between 240-pound fighters in that part of the world, you might as well make that fight. I guess you could try to. Well, this is what I would ask you. Like, honestly, so the idea is, do you think if steered away from each other for the time being, Ames, do you think that both of them have the talent level where they could win a world title on their own and then have a big unification in a couple of years?
I think it's so. Just to follow through my point at the end, like, you didn't sound like a guy who was particularly all that kind of on your edge of your seat, really wanted to see that fight next between Azim and Dalton Smith. That, although it's kind of bubbling on, and look, the phrase marinating is very frustrating one to use for a lot of boxing fans, but this is one where it does need to continue to ball on the hop. And just to answer your question, look, I do feel both of these are capable of winning world titles for sure. The landscape kind of changes, though, really, with the recent introduction of the Saudis and the Saudi money and their matchmaking and their aggressive matchmaking and want to make big fights. Like, that might mean that their money and the funds that they're waiting out for at the highest level might be there a couple of rungs down the ladder. So that's one to watch out for. But really, like, it's more from a Dalton Smith and Eddie Hearn perspective for his fighter that you kind of want to. I feel like both fighters have a high ceiling in terms of potential, but I feel like Adam Azim's ceiling is higher than Dalton Smith. And you, from a perspective of Smith and Hearn, will want to catch Azim before Azim starts racing towards your level or zoomed past you. I think that's what the feeling there is from that side of the camp, or at least the way that I read it anyway. Both real good, capable fighters, and even then, like, it would still be a really good close fight. And right now, I'll just say, as plain as I can do, I'd have Dalton Smith beating Azim, but I don't know how much longer you'd be able to kind of look at that and feel that same way. But Azim looks real great. Like, in terms of the fight, I kind of thought that this would be a difficult prospect, or at least different from other fights for Adam, because every other opponent that he's had has been an enemy, but this has been a friend. This is someone he's been in gyms when he's been building his foundations as a fighter, and he'd have looked up to someone like Davies, who was either the man at the gym or one of the men in the gym, and where he'd want to be pushing himself and who he'd be motivated by. And that can kind of maybe take your focus off and maybe lose a bit of your edge or your ruthlessness, or, you know, you might not go and press on the gas as much as you might have done when you're fighting someone that you don't have any real care for. But he didn't show any signs of that. He still seemed as wanting to finish his task as effective as he could. And when he had Davies down by a body shot, he was roaring in the corner, wanting O'Hara to get up so he can try and execute the finish off on Davies. Yeah, he had that spike from him. I think, like, a lot of people kind of look at the chin check test for any prospect in general to see whether this is just bluster from a promoter or whether this guy is the real deal and can take a shot. And the lightweights, it seems to be a bit more of a thing as it would be maybe in, well, not quite as much, but the heavyweight as well. Those are two when there's so much on the line. You need to be able to have a bit of a chin. But when you've got a flashy sort of style, when you're fast twitch, you feel like the other person, that fast twitch guy, can be got at, and that they might shatter when they get hit on the chin. And Azim took a few shots there, and for me, I thought like he's certainly shown that on TV now, that he can be hit by someone who's somewhat of a puncher, and he's not made of just easy to shatter glass here. This is a guy who's got defensive skills about him and can take his licks as well too, to get off what he wants as well. So look, real good all-round performance from Azim. Harry Davies since retired now, and in the fight week and in the launch press conference, the way he was speaking, some of the stuff that he was doing, you could tell this was a fighter who, for me, had the air of someone that this was going to be their last fight. And that is the case for Davies now. I remember a few years back, Davies was one of the first people who went onto YouTube and was doing a few YouTube videos on his own channel. And he did a video where he's talking about kind of falling through some of the pitfalls of boxing when you get paid and you get a load of money for fights, and you're like, oh wow, I've got all this money, what do I do with this now? And he might have bought the wrong things, he might have not channeled his money into the right places, might not have made smart investments, and he had to lose a lot of money to then realize that mistake. And he's since now channel that money to properties, and he can have income outside of boxing, which is great. I thought that was like an open letter to himself when he put that video out, and that's good to see. You have someone who, look, you might not win a world title, and he will absolutely kick himself for not beating Barroso and not showing a better account of himself against Barroso, and whatever the excuses, whatever the reasons, boxing fans just won't listen to him. Hardcore boxing fans just won't listen to him. It was there for him, and that kick comes back a little bit stronger, a little bit swifter in the scope of his retirement as well too, because he could have been a world champion on another day and another night, but it weren't meant to be for Hara. But he gets out of boxing with his faculties intact, being able to speak. The love for boxing as an active competitor, in his own words, isn't there, but he said he wants to stick around the sport, so maybe he looks to manage a few fighters and help guide them away from some of the pitfalls that he walked into or fell into. So yeah, look, it was a good performance from from Adam Azim, and OD sails off into the sunset. But yeah, look, a lot more to come from Adam, who is very much heralded at the McGuigan gym as a real big, huge talent, and he seems to be passing all the tests as they come.
And Des, I'll tell you, this is something interesting, and I don't have an opinion on this. Haven't seen enough of any of them to make such a bold prediction. But MB says Pierce O'Leary is better than both of them, and that's speaking of Dalton Smith and Adam Azim. What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, Pierce is a good fighter, and MB makes a valid point now. Pierce is a good fighter, and Pierce is in that group. I think, to pick up on something you asked Ames with regard to Azim and Smith, someone remind me, is Jack Catterall with the Zone now?
Yeah, he's a matchroom fighter.
Yeah, so I think you'll see Dalton Smith fight Prograis or Catterall long before we see Smith and Adam Azim fight. I think their trajectories are slightly off. I think they're on the different networks. The McGuigan have got a very definite pathway for Azim. I think his age is a factor. I think Dalton's age is also a contributory factor why the fight won't happen. I think they'll move Dalton a bit swifter, and I think he's been moved a bit swifter in his last couple of fights. And I think the people behind Dalton Smith, his promoter and the network, I think they'll probably aim him into the winner of Prograis and Catall, because I think that fight works. And I don't think we'll necessarily see the Dalton Smith-Adam Azim fight purely because of age and pathways of their respective teams. I don't think it's a natural fight that clashes. It would be a good fight, but with Ames, there's no need to see it just yet. I know it's a domestic fight, and we all like domestic fights, but I think it's the wrong time for that one personally. I think Dalton Smith can fight at a higher level, and I think we should let Adam Azim find his feet. Again, I go back to what I said. Adam Azim's very inexperienced, 12 fights and in. He's got himself a European title. I think he's got a lot of learning to do at that level.
You know, I think they need this. Like, 'cause I feel like I'm outside of themselves and maybe some promoter bluster as well too. I don't really think there's a real clamour from outside of hardcore boxing fans for Azim and Dalton Smith to fight each other. I think they need to share a card or two and then kind of build naturally a bit of their own. I know that maybe Adam's kind of biting back a little bit now, but you just kind of see Dalton Smith go out Ben Shalom or whatever it is, or Eddie then go at Ben and all that sort of stuff, and it's more like Eddie and Ben pushing themselves against each other as opposed to, and then kind of the afterthought of Azim and Dalton Smith. I think these two need to maybe share a card on a Riyadh season type of thing and build their fight naturally and compare a couple of mutual opponents if they can. And then that's how you kind of naturally build a fight between the two. But in terms of like either fighter kind of having a natural rivalry, that it's just two fighters in a division and they've kind of pitched each other against each other as opposed to anything kind of natural at the moment. I'm not certainly like, put it this way, if I wasn't in boxing and I had the option to purchase a ticket, like I probably wouldn't be because it doesn't capture me at the moment right now.
Yeah. And I agree with that, and I don't think it's a natural rivalry just yet as it is. This as hot as it could be, and I think if Dalton goes on, because I think he's a little bit further down the line. I think age has a big factor in that. I think if Dalton's a little bit further down the line, and if Dalton can get a Catterall fight or a Prograis fight, or maybe 2 or 3 fights in, can pick up a version of a world title, that gives Adam the chance to perhaps appear on the same card on underneath Dalton, and then we can sort of maybe build this rivalry, and maybe in 12 months or just to be after 12 months we could probably see a bigger fight than what it would be in the next 6 months. So I wouldn't be in a rush to see that one just yet, as much as people, hardcore fans, might want to see it out of interest because they're two kids in the same division. I don't think it's anywhere close to where it could be, and I just then genuinely think that Adam Zim's got a lot of learning to do. Also, on that note, Matty, I think O'Hara Davies is a polarising character, and at times in his career he's been treated badly, but also at times in his career he said some absolutely scandalous things, and I've never forgiven him for calling Scousers £6 an hour so-and-sos. I can't believe anyone in this day and age would say something like that to people, but he's made a lot of mistakes, and I think he's allowed himself to be around, at times, the wrong people. But what we can't say about O'Hara Davies, and what was levelled at him at one point, was he was a quitter. And I don't think anyone can call O'Hara Davies a quitter. Not after last night's performance, and not after the performances we've seen, going to America, fighting for world titles against guys like Barroso. I think it's only fair we accept that what he did against Josh Taylor was an awful lot of inexperience, and he was in a little bit of an anxiety attack, and he was in the middle of the mixer, and he made a real bad call. But certainly after last night's performance, where he was in trouble after the 3rd round, his nose was broke with a brilliant uppercut, and he was swallowing his own blood, and he kept coming out. I don't think we should call O'Hara Davies a quitter anymore. He was very brave last night, and if this is his last fight, good luck to him.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the end of the road. In the chat, James asked about Josh Taylor as a future opponent for Azim, or maybe any of these guys. And I kind of wonder if his future isn't at 147, or do you guys get a hunch that the career of Josh Taylor is over?
I think that Azim and Taylor, if not immediately, makes sense to happen quite soon, because the trajectories are there, I think, for Taylor and Azim, especially for Azim to look quite good. Taylor's been in some very, very tough fights. I mean, I'm looking at his record now. He's still only had 21 fights. And I feel like he's managed to take a lot of abuse in those, in that relatively short amount of time. Even though the people that he's lost to be fair to him, Teofimo Lopez, Jack Catterall, arguably twice, those are not losses to be embarrassed about. but I do feel like there's been a noticeable decline in terms of his speed and his facial durability. He swells up and he cuts, and with his kind of style, where he likes to sit in the pocket for long portions of the round and try and swing it out at times, I feel like that's a problem for him at this point in his career. So if you stack that up against someone like Azim, who's a very quick, sharp puncher, and perhaps naive to some of the finer points of the game at this point, I do feel like that's a good matchup for him. And when you consider, okay, maybe Azim and Josh Taylor, maybe they're not, on the same path themselves. But when you see that Josh Taylor fought Victor Postal in like his 12th or 13th fight, there is a case to be made for giving Azim that kind of step up at a similar time in his career. It might be too soon, but
he needs the old lion on his resume kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even though, Taylor's 33, but as I mentioned, there's a lot of miles on the clock. And I also think that's a very promotable fight when you think about the McGuigan aspect with Taylor as well. I'd like to see it for sure.
Yeah, and again, I don't know, Ames. What do you think that Taylor? Number one, do you think he might be done, or do you think he might be done at 140? I kind of actually think that's a curious fight based on that criteria, but I don't know what his future holds. Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything either. As far as I'm aware, he's a free agent, and you rewind back a couple of years, the idea of Josh Taylor not being one of the most sought after fighters and promoters and whatever wanted to sign him and get his signature, you would have thought that everyone would have been clamoring to get Josh Taylor, but he's really kind of just fallen off quite badly. And as was mentioned by James, look, he's only lost to Lopez and Catterall either once or twice, whichever way you want to slice it here. But the injury that he had, I think it's a foot injury, plantar fasciitis. As far as I'm aware, that's a proper hampering injury. That can be a real career ender if you don't manage that injury properly, because that comes and goes, and that flares up at any moment. And then he's had he's had surgery in his eye. I believe it was he had imbalance of pressure in his eye as well too. Just a couple of things just starting to add up and weigh up against him here. Whether I imagine he wouldn't continue at 140 and probably would move up to 147, but then you're giving up a lot for Josh, who's been a career super lightweight, and that's been his weight where he's just been so effective. It would be kind of difficult, I think, for Josh, but that will probably be the move. But I mean, even then with that fight with Adam Azim, we'll actually reflect a little bit back. The fight with Catterall, the second time round, Josh gave a much better reflection of himself than he did the first fight, and I think there seem to be at least performances in Josh here at the weight. So, and if it's the Josh that turns up against Catterall the second time round, for someone like Azim, that I feel is a bit too soon for him. But then you also kind of look as well, who would be in the corner for both of them, and more so who's in Azim's corner, and that's Shane McGuigan, who knows Josh Taylor so well. It was a combination that worked so well for him and guided him to unified titles in the division. And he would know Josh Taylor inside and out for Azim to create a game plan with Azim, to beat him. I still don't think it's soon. It's also kind of the factor of, I still think it's too soon. It's also the factor as well, you'd be up against a guy who proper puts it on you in the fight week, proper makes you an enemy in the fight week. And Azim's still a bit young to that. Azim's still a bit kind of although I don't think he'd wilt in the face of it, you've got to kind of manage those situations and manage those big nights, because that would be a big fight. It's a big pressure fight and a big pressure moment, and then you add that sort of thing into the mix as well too. You got to manage those things. And OD was saying that Boxer kind of wanted him to really put it on Adam, because he's not had that yet. And I don't know if that was a tell or OD was just kind of spicing things up and making a few things up just to throw a few digs in and have a bit of his own fun. But if that's true, Josh brings that in spades and will just turn you into his mortal enemy. And I don't think Adam Azim's had that life experience just yet. And I think a few more fights before he fights Josh Taylor. But yeah, it would be a great fight, one with interest inside and outside the ring.
Yeah, you got, and who knows? I mean, there's 140 is an interesting division. There's enough talent around there. You can kind of make any number of interesting fights, at least on paper, going on there. But let's see here. Also on that card, and I saw less and less of this as it went on. This was a little bit of a surprising outcome here. Michael Mickinson lost a unanimous decision to Tulani Mbenge. He was just kind of getting roughed up in the early part of the fight. Had some good rounds later, but that's a good win for Mbenge there. I was kind of surprised by that outcome, Des. I actually rate Mickinson quite highly.
Yeah, Mickinson is a good fighter, but he's not a puncher. And he needs to do clean work and he needs to be crisp with his punches. And he allowed himself to get drawn into a fight with a tough kid, a roughhouse. And Mbenge, I think then I looked at Mbenge and he got beat by Sebastian Formella a few fights back or a few years back. And I think the Mickinson team would have thought our boxing skills and our crisp punching and our angles will be enough. But Mbenge did what we've seen a lot of South African fighters do. They've come over here and they've meant it. And he reminded me, a lot of older listeners will remember Tashafi Munyai, who came over and beat Martin Powers a couple of times and beat Lee Haskins. Sometimes you come across one that has slipped through the net. He's a good kid. He's tough. He's strong. And if you can't crack, he ain't going to go away. And Mickinson didn't have the punch to stop it becoming a hard fight. I thought Mbenge was a worthy winner. It's not the end of the road for Mickinson, but they're the sort of fights he can't get drawn into because he's not a puncher. So he's got to work on his boxing abilities. He's got to work on them accurate, straight, crisp punches. And he neglected all those things last night. So Mbenge was a worthy winner. Good fighter, very tough and rugged.
Yeah, and I kind of I got to give it to Mickinson. I thought he was gonna get stopped somewhere around about the 7th, so I started looking that way. And
I did.
He kind of bit down and he pushed Mbenge back after that. He's got a lot of grit, and I think after what we've seen of him through time, I think he's somebody that competes somewhere in the between domestic and European level. But he's a good enough fighter, and he's a heck of a test for kids, especially welterweight. You're never going to be struggling for people to fight in that division.
But that's why Mickinson can't let himself get into the round 7, 8, 9 territory and have to stop this kid because he ain't got that type of crack. He ain't got that dig on him. So Mickinson's got to start a fight almost like, I'm going to have a look at him but give nothing away. And then as I go into the 4th, 5th, 6th round territory, I'm going to put this kid where I want him. And I'm going to be winning next 4 rounds on my crisp, accurate punching. He's got good hands, good feet, Mickinson. I mean, look, it's only a few years ago when we had some really good welterweights at domestic level. Mickinson was the sort of the dark horse of a lot of them. And for a lot of hardcore boxing fans, we had Mickinson at the top of that pile. He was the one that a lot of them wanted to avoid. We had a really good win over Chris Congo. Good fighter, Mickinson, but he can't go into rounds 7, 8, and 9 needing the stoppage because he hasn't got that type of power. So he got drawn into the wrong fight. But let's credit to Mbenge. You come over here and then what we've seen a lot of good fighters from Africa do. He took it to the kid, the home fighter.
Absolutely. Before we move on, there's just a couple of more fights maybe to touch on there. But before we move on, why don't we give a chance to backtrack, because joining us, the man himself, Rappin' Rob Kelly. Rob, we have gotten about halfway through the British card from yesterday, and we've also talked about Zoo. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on what has happened on any of those fights that you saw.
Yeah, I thought the Zoo one was a turn up for the books. Like, I don't know what the matchmaking is like. I can't remember seeing this guy before, but after seeing him last night, he's the guy that knocked out Jack Kulkai standing up, isn't he? And fuck me, man, he has a hell of a left hook on him. He looks like a big unit for 54. And as soon as Zoo got hit, the signs looked ominous. Like it looked like he wasn't going to be able to recover. Towel saving him in the end. Yeah, like a big, like Tim Zoo's a bit of an enigma for me. Like he beaten decent operators in Australia. He definitely made all the right noises. I think he built a bit of a cult fan base based off his dad's reputation, obviously, which you have to always fucking inevitably mention when you're mentioning him. He made a bit of a statement on ESPN that he was not no motherfucking junior or something like that. One of his moments when he said that, my name is Tim Zoo, I'm my own man. Like, really a lot to like about the guy. As we discussed last week, when he actually had the banana skin with Fondora, he was due for a layup, like, or a perceived layup with Keith Thurman. And then not going straight back to Fondora, having this guy. How do you pronounce this guy's second name? Bakram
Murtazaliev.
Murtazaliev,
You're asking Matty for pronunciations. Oh man, we've hit you low.
But I like this guy, like a fucking Eastern European style again, straight up, fucking strong, really good technique. Hadn't really had fucking many tests on his own resume, but fucking dealt with Zoo, like. So that's what happens when you're at the top level. I guess 54. There was noise of Zoo versus Crawford. You'd have to wonder what fucking Crawford would have done to him, seeing as he's come off losses now to Fondora, which I thought he legitimately lost, albeit he suffered an awful cut, and now he's had this one. So he took the defeat like a man. He didn't make any excuses. He said he felt great. He didn't really know what hit him. Maybe he got caught cold. A lot of fighters can get caught cold. Like maybe he wasn't ready. Like if you get caught early in a fight, sometimes it's very hard to recover. But it looked like the difference in punching power was a bit fucking scary last night. Like Zoo was kind of known as being a bit of a puncher himself, but this guy was fucking landing clean on him, and then just going to work like he's supposed to do. You know, going to work and getting the job finished. Like didn't let up. He grasped his opportunity, and you'd like to see him out against anybody now at 54. Him and Madrimov would be a really good fight, actually, I think. So yeah, that was a bit of a turn up for the books. And then what was on the UK card again? Shannon Courtney lost. I see him. I'm devastated.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to that one. That was amusing enough. You had the Dan Aziz, Lewis Edmonson fight on there. You had Adam Azim and O'Hara Davies was on there that we've touched on that one so far. And we touched on Michael Mickinson against Tulani Mbenge.
Yeah, I saw the Azim and O'Hara Davies fight. I think, yeah, Davies making the right decision to bow out now. Like, he's only going to be a gatekeeper if he holds on. He wasn't quite good enough to get over the line at world level. And do you know what? There's nothing probably wrong with that. Like, he lost to a very good version of Josh Taylor on the way up. Took his licks, you know, he quit. He admitted he quit. And he took his social media licks. And fellas had to kind of fucking rewarm to him or whatever. He went down the golden ticket route, I think, didn't he? And put himself back in the shape for a title. And then old man Ishmael fucking absolutely obliterated him. So it was a fight.
He learned a long time ago that nobody can beat Father Time.
Yeah, exactly. Literal Father Time. But fucking yeah. So I think like if he sticks around, he's only going to be a gatekeeper. Went out to a kid. Adam Azim was very sharp. I still think he's far from the finished article himself. We'll have to see what he looks like when he gets tested. But he dealt with O'Hara Davis the way a top rated prospect should deal with somebody who's at that stage of his career. He fucking got the job done. Like I said, sharp all night, switched on, faster, quicker, slicker. Good left hook on the finish as well. Davis didn't want to know. Like he said before the fight, that he'd fallen out of love with boxing. Whether that was a pre-made excuse or not, I don't know. But yeah, he's had his time, which wasn't much. Like as we said, like he didn't do a whole lot in his career. But again, like he's just not just short of world level. I'd say he's a good bit level short of world level, and got himself made a few paydays and got his name out there. Certainly, could probably consider himself hard done by Matchroom in his time, but that's for another day. It should be about Adam Azim now. To get Dalton Smith next, why not? Like why not? If Turkey Al-Sheikh is putting on all these cards with these UK fighters on them, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of financial restraints on the budget, then maybe there's a home for that in Riyadh season at some stage. But Azim could probably do maybe one or two more outings. But if, like I said, there's kind of no lose if these kind of once the promotional companies seem to be working under all the same umbrella ultimately. there's not much downside for a loss to one of these guys if they fight each other now. So, that could happen next to be an interesting fight. Well, I didn't see much else. I know Aziz got a decision and Yarde, yeah, bit of an enigma. Like, limited, but exciting, but can be exciting. But I just think he's with the wrong setup. But anyway.
Yeah, I was just that was going to be the next fight we moved into on that one, and I don't know where Ames went, but Des, I gotta say that Yarde, that fight was probably closer than the ref single scorecard would lead you to believe, and he just looked generally pedestrian.
Yeah. Look, Rob called Yarde the enigma. I've never been sold on Yarde purely because I've never seen him come through the levels, and I think his best win is Lindenhofer, but Lindenhofer beat him back or beat him first, and Yarde got the return. I'm not sure where Anthony Yarde goes, but look, I think he's a 10 out of 10 athlete, but I think he's a 3.5, 4 out of 10 boxer, and I think as you get past that line, as you go into sort of anywhere close to European level, and this probably explains why Yarde never fought for a British title or a European title. When you go past that European level, you have to know how to box. You have to have a reasonably high boxing IQ. You have to have good feet, good hands. You have to understand angles. You have to have a good jab. You have to be able to read your opponent. And I don't think Anthony Yarde does any of them things. And I think last night was a prime example of that. He's not a good reader of a fight. I think Anthony Yarde's a really good athlete. And I think when you match him correctly, he'll out-punch you, out-strength you, out-strong you, out-muscle you. He must be able to crack, but you probably can't tell me his best knockout. I mean, I know he stopped Lindenhofer, but that doesn't give us a very high bar, does it? I don't think he goes anywhere near Buatsi. I think Buatsi would switch him off completely and stand him on his head. I think a good fight for Anthony Yarde would be Dan Aziz, but I wouldn't fancy Yarde against Hutchinson. I wouldn't fancy Yarde against Buatsi. I wouldn't fancy Yarde against maybe even Spider Richards. I think Spider Richards might be too big, too strong. I just think Yarde's one of them guys that he's had quite a highlight reel career because he's knocked over a lot of kids, but they've all been the sort of kids he should be knocking over. I think they've always stayed in their comfort zone. I think they've been very, very, sensible and cautious with his matchmaking.
Long spells of inactivity too.
He's been a pro for 10 years, Matty, and he's people might slaughter me because he stepped up against Beterbiev and Kovalev, and I get that. They were huge fights. Hall of Famers, got paid really well, and he acquitted himself really well against Beterbiev. He had the fight with Beterbiev, but if I bring it down and say, look, what have you done domestically? What have you done at a European level? What have you done against kids where we can really gauge your ability? It's not a lot. So I don't know where Yarde goes. I'd love to see the Yarde Buatsi fight because I think that would be huge on Sky. I think it would sell. But I think Yarde needs a dance partner. I don't think Yarde's big enough or sells a good enough ticket to be a standalone type guy. I think he needs a dance partner. I think the Buatsi fight will be a good one.
Yeah, that could be an interesting fight, and I would also expect him to lose, and it could almost be like a fight kind of like Davies had with Azim. I mean, I know that that obviously Buatsi's beyond that level, but kind of like, do I have it anymore? Let's test it.
I think Buatsi's got a really good jab. He's got really good feet. He knows how to control a pace. He can slow you down, switch you off. I think Buatsi is an absolute nightmare for Anthony Yarde. An absolute nightmare. I don't think Yarde gets anywhere near him. But I think that's a fight that would capture the imagination over here. It would certainly sell in London, and I think it's a good fight for Sky.
Do you know what it is? There's a saying like that Yarde doesn't have like boxing IQ or he can't read a fight. Like, is that coming down to all the years of not sparring? Like, because he hadn't got a massive amateur background. Like, the only way you learn people's patterns is through repetitive action, through reactionary stuff in sparring. Like pads is great, like, but you can turn a fella fucking like you can get a fella off the street and have him looking great on pads within 6 weeks if you're just drilling. You have him looking fucking like doing these Instagram fucking reels over the shoulder and all. You can do that with anybody, like, but there's no substitute for experience, like.
No, you're right, and last night, ironically, would have probably been Yarde would have gone home last night and thought, I learned so much in that 10 rounds. You know, I really understand what I've got to do and what I need to be doing, but he's not had enough of them, and he's probably past the stage of learning now. That window's shut. And if you go back to the start of Anthony Yarde's career, I've not looked at this, but I can imagine it is because I know the way you bring these fighters up. He probably come in at cruiserweight and was bringing kids up from super middleweight. He's probably had plenty of notice. He's probably had kids with losing records, and they've all been knockover jobs. And that was probably a staple diet for the first 2.5, 3 years. I'm not sure you learn anything knocking people over. You know, you learn under the lights. You learn by getting rounds in. You learn by turning fights around. You learn by having to navigate around different styles. And absolutely, the non-sparring thing would definitely be a contributory factor to all of that. I just think it's been a very cautious, it's been a little bit manipulative, it's been a little bit uninspiring, but I get it. Yarde came along when Frank had Box Nation. He needed to prop up shows. I think Yarde might have been the right fit. Look, I suppose if you take yourself away from being a boxing fan and look at the job that they've done with him, Adidas sponsorships, big money fights with Kovalev, big money fights with Beterbiev. I get it. There'd be a lot of people in that business that say you've done a fantastic job for him. But as a boxing fan, I'm a bit like Rob. I think he's just an enigma. I think this is a kid that is an awful lot of hot air. But if he fights Buatsi and beats Buatsi, what does that make me? But I stand on what I say. I stand on my square. I don't think he gets anywhere near Buatsi.
But there's certain things that he can do that make him so exciting. Like the Kovalev fight, you can look back at it like whatever, and even the Beterbiev fight because he did it. I think he handled himself very well in the Beterbiev fight. He did a lot better than a lot of people thought he'd do.
Correct.
And he had moments in that, and only those. And he had one big round against Kovalev. But the difference was he didn't fucking know what to do with him. He had him gone, but he didn't know what to do with him because he hasn't got that level of boxing IQ that comes with experience. And like, fellas can come to the pro game late, cool, but they're the projects where you learn on the job. If you haven't got amateur background, you need fucking rounds like with humans, not fucking padmen. Like, so yeah, I think that was a big opportunity missed. They probably would have, ultimately had him exposed earlier if he had beaten Kovalev. Then maybe the wheels would have fallen off by this stage. Like if he was fighting better opposition, but. There was a real chance there for him to finish that version of Kovalev, and he just didn't know what to do with him, and they didn't know what to do with him either. So,
no, they didn't. I think if I remember that one correctly, Rob, there was all like in that Yarde call, there was all a little bit surprised because I think Kovalev won the first 7 or 8 rounds, didn't he? Yarde had a brilliant round 8 or 9, but then he got stopped in the next round. I think
because they're screaming at him to empty the fucking tank, they didn't accept the lead in the corner. Do you remember that? Leave it all in the fucking that, which is there's a time for that. Like, but this time was like we're turning the fucking tide here now. Just be patient, you'll get him again. Like maybe about that, you know what I mean? But
and ultimately, like we've got so many good light heavies in this country, and there's so much competition. We've just not seen Yarde with any of them. Tell a lie, we see him against Lyndon Arthur during COVID, but we've not seen Yarde have a staple come up of area belt, English belt, British title, Commonwealth title, European title, or go anywhere near them titles. So what's his best win? What's his best knockout? What do we measure him against? And I go back to it. I look at Anthony Yarde, seemed like a lovely kid. He's being managed really sensibly and carefully and cautiously. He's earned a few quid. Hopefully he's financially secure. He's a brilliant athlete. But what I saw last night suggests to me he's not a good reader of a fight. He doesn't know how to get around the jab. He's not got a particularly good jab himself. He's not got a very high ring IQ. He's an athlete. He's a big, strong athlete. But you need more than that when you go into the levels they're talking about taking him into. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's just a matter of where he goes next. God only knows on that one, but there's options. As far as if you look at it as a broad domestic scene, 175 pounds in the UK is pretty hot right now with some
If
interesting
Whittaker had
fights
held up
being made.
if Whittaker had held up his end of the bargain and got by Liam Cameron, Whittaker and Yarde would have been a good fight.
Was it that Whittaker didn't hold up his end of the bargain, or the ropes didn't hold up their end of the
Well,
bargain?
something didn't hold up. Well, a lot of things don't hold up around that scenario, but
Rob, who wins? Who wins, Rob? Cameron or Yarde?
Right now, you'd back Cameron to fucking push him all the way, but I could see him blasting out Cameron just the same. You know that way. I think maybe the rematch between Whittaker and Cameron looks different even at this stage, but it's a right good fight for Liam Cameron if he can't get the fucking Whittaker rematch. Like,
yeah, I like that fight.
So yeah, it's that was it was an interesting card with some, but there was a bit to be learned about some fighters and where they might go. It was a kind of a setting the table, a preview of things to come. Something that probably will not be coming again, in God knows how many ways. Shannon Courtney lost to the previously 5-3-1 Catherine Tacone Ramos. I was looking at the odds in the morning, and I'm like, I think Courtney's going to lose. I don't think she wants any more of this boxing stuff, but I didn't do that. Silly me. Who did not lose was Francesca Hennessy. She beat a gal who has 5 names, and I'm not going to go through them all. Undefeated at the time. I have no idea who she has fought. So anyhow, one goes away, one keeps going. We shall see what happens with Hennessy next. I don't know if I want to see what happens with Courtney next. I'll just leave that one to the want ads that exist over there. So best of luck to both of them. But anyhow, let's see here. Des, you said you caught a show on Friday. Why don't you run down that real quick?
Small horse show at the Frank Warren show, and we had Tommy Fletcher. He was the Norfolk Nightmare going in. I think he was 8-0, 6 KOs against Milan Volkovs, Latvian kid who had a pretty, lukewarm record of 11-3-2, and was a decent puncher. And I always say this, and I can apply this to Tommy Fletcher, and I can apply it to Courtney Bennett, who was also on the card, who also come unstuck against Nick Webb. Boxing's the only sport where you haven't got to earn any money, you haven't got to hold any titles, and you ain't even got to be that busy or active. But when you walk out onto the street, when you go into a gym, when you go into a leisure centre, when you go into a cafe, when you go to a local institution, everyone treats you like royalty. You can really be picked up and taken away with it because everyone is impressed by a boxer. And I think sometimes that happens to young pros when they're in that sort of debut to the first title or debut to the first 10 fights. And I think we might have seen a bit of this on Friday night. I think Tommy Fletcher might have had 6 or 7 knockover jobs because you can't pick one big win out of it. You can't pick out where he's had to work hard. You can't pick out where he's struggled in a couple of rounds and had to turn it around, or he's had to find the second gear. And that's a story of young pros, I know. But I sometimes think these young pros get given so many knockovers. When they have someone that pushes back, I don't quite know how to respond. And sometimes they have an anxiety attack in there. And they get caught in the mixer and don't know how to respond. And looking at Tommy Fletcher on Friday, the Norfolk Nightmare, he looked completely out of sorts. He didn't know how to respond to a kid that was hitting him back, that kid that come to win. And of course, this kid, going into the third round, really fancied it, and he went and took it. And he was well beat, Tommy Fletcher. And the same can be said for Courtney Bennett, who fought Nick Webb. Now, there might be a lot of people in the chat that watch that one. Now, Nick Webb hasn't boxed for 3.5 years. I think he's had 2 minutes of boxing. That's when Fabio Wardley flattened him 3 years ago. And Nick Webb essentially retired from boxing, but he just come back. And Courtney Bennett 4-0, thought, I'm going to take a 10-rounder and fight for the Southern Area belt. But there's so much to be said for knowing how to do 10 rounds, knowing how to do 8 rounds. That's why we do it 4s to 6 to 8s to 10s. That's why it takes a process and a time. And Courtney Bennett rolled the dice and sort of fast-tracked his way into doing 10 rounders fighting for belts. I don't knock him for being brave. I don't knock him for being ambitious. But he come across a wily campaigner in Nick Webb who's been around, he's had a lot of fights and has not got a bad record. He's only been beaten by a couple of good fighters. So he found himself with a 20-stone Nick Webb who wasn't going away. And after about round 4, Courtney Bennett had run out of ideas and was gassing out. And in the end, his corner stopped it, I think, sort of 30 seconds into round 8. It might have been round 9, but it doesn't mean Tommy Fletcher and Courtney Bennett can't come again. But these fights are what could make them better fighters. In a similar sense to Tim Tszyu last night, if you learn from it, you can become better for it. But it's certainly back to the drawing board for Tommy Fletcher and Courtney Bennett.
All right. Yeah, and I, on my end, I caught the ProBox card on Wednesday. I actually just finished it up today. I dozed off in the middle, and not for a lack of action. I was just out of it. But a couple of the fights to talk about. Najee Lopez taking out a fighter that he should have taken out. It was a late notice opponent, apparently. He just did the job that he should as a prospect. David Navarro upsetting Michael Gamble, who was a pretty touted prospect on the show there. And then you had Senvatar or Erdenabat. I always have a tough time with that one. The Mongolian kid took a unanimous decision over Frenchie Fortunato. He looks all right. He's a 130-pound fighter, I believe. And I could actually see them, if they keep pushing off Otar Aranosian from getting his chance. I could see them doing that one. That could be an interesting fight, actually. Both of them like to throw a lot of punches, but aren't big hitters. Could be a hell of a fight if they made that one, actually. So that wouldn't be a bad second grab if they don't give Otar his shot that he worked for. But all of this was before the main event. Chris Colbert losing by TKO in the 9th round against Omar Salcedo. He looked good for the first couple of rounds, but you just can't take a shot anymore. You can walk him down, you can beat him up. And Salcedo goes on and will hopefully get a decent shot at lightweight. Chris Colbert probably needs to call it a day. At very least, he said he wants to try to go back down to junior lightweight. And my God, he certainly has not taken punches at 135 very well. This is 2 stoppage victories in a row. And, depending on how you look at it for Colbert, this is really like 4 losses in a row, because most people thought he lost by decision to Valenzuela in their first encounter before Valenzuela beat the crap out of him and stopped him last time around. And before that was the loss to Hector Luis Garcia, where he lost his title. So Chris Colbert, definitely in a bad way. He's either 1-3 or 0-4, if you want to get hard on him in the last 4. So he might be, I don't know, might be best for him to do what Davies did and just call it a day. Jamie throwing $4.99 in there says thanks for the continued content, lads. Still the best boxing pod out there. Thank you very much. We appreciate you very much, Jamie. And all the people who continue to listen to it, and maybe some new listeners that we picked up recently. I'd like to thank some people in here today. Let's say here, we got Ray, we got AP, we got Dex 2024, we got the good man Michael Thompson in there, M. Lithgow, the aforementioned Jamie. Let's see here. There's definitely some new ones up top if we get that far. MB in there, AP in there, Ray, I think I might have mentioned him, Thomas Newman. Let's see here. Miami Virtue, he's been around here a little bit lately. Good dude. M. Lithgow, Porky's Corner. What Porky's Corner? We don't know. God, it could be anyone. The imitators, they imitate all sorts of things these days. My God. Let's see here. Get a few more, maybe. Maybe not. Yimmy Yappy was in here. Harvey Price Boxing returns. Those guys have been in here for a very long time. Rongda Said Spence is absolutely done earlier. Appreciate them for being in here. Alonso
Help me,
Tremendous.
Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda.
Mike Maverick in there as well. Hadn't seen him in here, I don't think, prior. So right on. Thank you for coming in here, guys. Mr. Tosh Jr. Malone in there as well. Harvey Brown. And yeah, we had some new ones. Arlene Burley in there on top as well. So thank you for everyone for being in here today. There's not a whole lot of action going on next week. I guess just one major card to kind of talk about. Let's see here. I was looking at, here's the old schedule right here. On Wednesday, and back to back weeks for ProBox, which is weird. Miyo Yoshida, who you guys will all remember and will love. She was the one who lifted the title off of Ebony Bridges. She's in a rematch with Sharetta Metcalf, who had actually beat her in the fight prior to her victory over Ebbs. That's going to be headlining a Broadway boxing show put on by Lou DiBella on Wednesday. Also on that card, it looks like Edward Vasquez versus Kenneth Taylor. They have a DAZN card, Manuel Flores versus Victor Olivo. And then let's see here. This one might want to look at some more. Harlem Eubank going to be headlining a Channel 5 card on Friday against Nurali Erdogan. The only reason I know that is because of world events. God help us all. Let's see here. Let's see if we can't find the rest of that card and see if there's anything that you guys might like on there to speak or at least know what's going on. Let's see here. All right. Also on that card, see here, gonna have I don't know how they have this one arranged. Gonna have Khalil Majid against Levi Kinslona, Ben Marksby against Alan Florin Chicherchi, Dan Toward against Emil Spiss. That almost sounds like Ismail's piss. Go figure that one. Let's see here. Niall Brown against Pablo Sosa. Sophie Alch against Lynch Buchinski. Alex Murphy, Dan Booth. Alice Perez against Stefan Vincent. Matty Harris against Lamar Griggs. Cody Smith against Angel Gomez. And, of course, the aforementioned Harlem Eubank against Nurali Erdogan. Let's see here. Des, any name jumping out on that one for you other than Harlem Eubank? You know any of these young kids? I imagine most of them are youngsters.
No, that's just a routine card from, I think, probably the Sowland brothers. So that would be on Channel 5. And we spoke about Adam Azim earlier, Matty. Well, over here, Adam Azim was meant to fight Harlem Eubank. I don't know why that one, maybe James knows or Rob knows, but Harlem was meant to fight Adam Azim, but that fight never materialized. So they got the O'Hara Davies fight. But if Harlem comes through that on Friday night, that might be one that the people behind Adam Azim are looking to revisit.
Yeah, possible. The Harlem has been looking all right as of late, but yeah, this is an okay card for Friday. James, if you're not doing anything, are you going to be watching Harlem Eubank? Is this enough to draw your attention?
Yeah, I'd probably tune into the tail end of that. I'm just looking at Harlem Eubank's record now. Undefeated, 19-0. That's not too bad. But then it's against what opposition? Is he still with Adam Booth? Do you know?
Not a clue on that one. Des, do you have a clue on that one?
Yeah, he's still training with Adam Booth. And I think Harlem would be a good opponent for Adam Aziz because he's the type of opponent they like. He's got a good record. He's not a puncher. And I think it would give Adam Aziz the rounds they want. So don't be surprised if Harlem comes through this and they push for that fight.
Is that a competitive fight, or is that like to stretch the wrestling analogy, is that like a squash match for Azim? Because I've not seen too much of Eubank, so I couldn't really gauge where they'd be at. Is that a one-sided fight or competitive, or how do you see that going?
Well, Adam Azim, in his sort of ninth bout, was the European champion. He's got a really good trainer. He's got a really good team behind him. He's got a fantastic network behind him. From what I've seen of Adam Azim, he's got really fast hands, good feet, very good boxer. Harlem Eubank ain't got fast hands or particularly good feet, and he's not overly a good boxer, but he's a very strong, solid kid. But he's been nowhere near an Adam Azim, James, you know. So that would be a big step up for Harlem. And on the back of last night, I'm not sure Harlem's that much of a step up for where Adam Azim's been. So I'd expect Adam Azim to come through that, but it's perfect opponent for Adam Azim because Harlem's like 19-0. He's got the Eubank name, and it's that thing that they're doing with Adam Azim. They're not putting him in with punches, and I know why. I can see why. When you've got fast hands and quick feet, a good fighter that can punch will punch with you. A la Danny Garcia, Amir Khan. Good fighters punch with quick hands. Good fighters punch with fast punches. So they're not going to put him in with a big puncher just yet. But Harlem would be perfect for Adam Azim, and it would give us it would spark a lot of interest over here, Matty. So I think that'd be something they'd probably look to do. I think Harlem comes through Friday night because the kid he's got's not a puncher either, far from it. So I think Harlem comes through that, headlining a Sauerland show on Channel 5, and perhaps that's something they can make.
All right. Well, let's see here. Now, I just look around, not a whole lot going on, but so I just think we'll go to this card here. This is going to be, where at here? Oh, God, I hit the wrong one. My apologies, folks. My apologies. There we go. That's the one we're looking at. Live from, let's see here, from the Co-op Arena in Manchester. Going to have a card headlined, obviously, Jack Catterall and Regis Prograis. We'll get to that in a second. Let's go over some of the more domestic fare that's going on there. We're going to have Reese Bellotti taking on Michael Gomez Jr. That one, actually, it could be an interesting scrap, honestly, on paper. We have Pat McCormick against Williams Andres Herrera. James Flint and Campbell Hatton. Have they met before?
Yes, that's the one that last time beat Campbell Hatton.
Yeah, you're right. And then he went and turned around and lost to Kyle Boyd. Oh, silly goose. Why did you go and do that? Now you're back fighting Campbell Hatton again. Terrible. Then we're going to have Joe McGrail and Lewis Morris. Junaid Bostain against Malco Samariva. And and William Crawla is going to be on there against Lorenzo Grasso. So anyhow, what are your thoughts on that undercard there, Des?
Right. So ask James or Ames, and I want to just pull the undercard up. My BoxRec's been a bit slow.
You're fine. You're fine. I'll turn that to Ames. Ames, you snuck in there on me, and he's got his admin privileges on here, so he can just load himself onto the screen. You sneaky guy, you. What are your thoughts on this under? You bastard. What are your thoughts on this undercard for Regis Prograis and Jack Catterall? And we'll get to the main event after.
Sorry, I completely missed the rest of the conversation surrounding Adam Azim versus Ahara Davies. So apologies for missing that. I'll have to catch up on the playback. That's a little plug for anyone else who's not listened as well to catch up on the rest of the Boxing Asylum. I'm just pulling up as well myself as well too. So give me a second. I've got it up here now. Look, nothing really to overly look forward to with respect.
I think Bellotti and Gomez and Michael Gomez Jr. could be a fun fight. Actually, I think that could be entertaining.
Look, there is talent on the undercard by all means, and you've got some good talent from the area and surrounding areas as well. Flint versus Hatton too. This is a rematch for Campbell Hatton. There's a lot on the line in that fight for Campbell Hatton, who has since changed trainer from Uncle Matthew down to, I think he's with Barry Smith as opposed to Ben Davison, but we'll have Ben Davison, of course, in his corner as well too. And look, we're already discussing about kind of it being a hard road back for Campbell Hatton with his dad's legacy. We've seen Tim Zhu at the height of this program talking about him and his defeat to Murtazaliev, but at a much higher level. And for someone like Campbell Hatton, who he hasn't won over boxing fans, he hasn't won over hardcore boxing fans. He's got a lot of goodwill, but he's got a tough hill to climb. To lose central area level, it wasn't a great look for him. And you had kind of the feeling kind of could have been like sort of with Ben, how he was sort of a lot was thrown at him, criticism was thrown at him, and Ben sort of worked at his craft a little bit more and improved. And you haven't really seen that improvement with Campbell. And a promoter might give someone like Campbell Hatton more rope to work with because of the name and the potential money they can make if they make good in the sport. They'll give him a bit more time. And I think Eddie has given him a bit more time because this is his 14, 15 fight, and this is the level that he's at. And Eddie won't want to particularly deal too much at this sort of level. So Campbell Hatton is really kind of in a telling fight for him here, both I think promotionally and as well for his career in it being at levels higher than this level. So I'm not so sure how that fight goes for him or whether he can avenge that defeat. Elsewhere, good talent on the undercard. Junaid Bostan, certainly one to look out for. He faltered a little bit recently. I think it might have been his last fight or maybe the fight before. But he's one of those who, from that Sheffield sort of area, I think it was Gordy Russ Jr. or Gordy Russ 2? Gordy Russ Jr. Is it Gordy Russ Jr.? I think it was. But Gordy Russ, anyway, over in America, I think he took quite a few shots and wasn't quite his usual self in that fight. And he kind of pushes himself a lot. A lot of the Sheffield kind of area sort of fighters really quite vocal. And I think he needs to pick up another big win as well to keep the momentum going. Who else is on that undercard? William Crawler. Haven't seen too much of William Crawler. Joe McGrail, another good talent. Pat McCormack. Both the McCormack brothers have kind of had.
He's not Anthony Crawler's young fella, is he? He's this fucking fight of fucking juniors.
I think it's his brother.
Is his brother? Okay.
Yeah. No, I think the McCormack brothers themselves sort of had that kind of really kind of been waiting for them to take off. Had faltering careers so far because it's just been so stop, start, and non-events. And we always hear about the talent and how good they are and how much talent they had on the GB system and the wait for them to turn pro, and this would really be their takeoff, and it hasn't quite happened yet for either of them. So hopefully Pat can get some momentum in his career and really kind of push on towards the start of next year. And Bellotti versus Gomez Jr. Look, Reece Bellotti, we're talking about kind of fighters who had hard roads and not really had good promotion around them or never really had a promotional deal. From Watford as well too, which is a local team that I support. I've always kind of always had a little bit of an eye on Reece Bellotti, and he's tried hard to push beyond the British level and push further and try and get towards as high as he can. But this is probably about Reece Bellotti's level, and he's good at this level, and he can punch at this level, and he's durable at this level as well too. Michael Gomez Jr. has had a lot of fights, but it's certainly a big step for Gomez. His last fight over against Kane Baker, it's real. Like Kane's a good fighter. Like even though his record is and he's a B-side fighter, he's a very capable fighter. And to have stopped Kane, although Kane's kind of had his licks as well too in the sport, it's a good victory. But it's a big step up with respect to Kane's level up into a British level where Reece Bellotti is like hardened and steadfast at that level. So that'll be a good fight, like you were saying, Matty. That'll be a real good fight. I think I'd probably favour Reece Bellotti here actually to hold on to his title. But other than that, outside of the main event, there's not really too much I'm particularly kind of gearing up for.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that one. James, I'm struggling to find something to get up for on this card. I mean, the main event, obviously, to watch, and then Bellotti against Gomez Jr. Did you hear anything where you're like, oh, I like that fight? If not, I'm not offended by any stretch.
No, it's all good. Campbell Hatton's always an interesting figure to me because the sons of like famous fighters, they often suffer by comparison. And
that could be the theme of the show, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It holds true a lot of the time. And I mean, you can say what you want about Conor Ben. I mean, the other night when he got into the ring. He was going on like Scarface's drug dealer. He was just out of control. But he's like shown massive improvements as a professional. And I think he's very game, and I think he's very physically talented. And how far that takes him after he's had X amount of time out of the ring, and you know, the inevitable Eubank fight, I don't know. But you could see after some early missteps where he's improved, and he has looked pretty impressive, whether he's been loaded up on eggs or not. So with Campbell Hatton, it's like, I don't know if he has that same potential for improvement. And I feel like his placement...
Well, maybe if you dope him up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I feel like his position on cards like this, it's almost like misfits adjacent, if you get what I mean. Like, he's by no stretch like better than however many other fighters that are more capable than him, but don't have the name and the profile that could be the opener in this. But because of his like second name and his dad's reputation is here, and I don't feel like he's as physically talented or got as high a ceiling as someone like Conor Benn. I mean, I might be wrong, and I'm not saying Conor Benn's like the next coming or whatever. But yeah, I wonder what's going to happen with him in the future, like what his aspirations are, and whether he continues to exist on a public level, because there doesn't seem to be that much reason for him to fight outside of his own ambitions, which, to be honest, is a valid enough reason. But I just wonder where he's going, like, you know what I mean? But other than that, it's one of those things where I would tune into that with few expectations and just hope a few barn burners break out.
I tell you what's interesting from the point of view of having the juniors on the show and the Campbell Hatton or whatever. Like, we just mentioned or covered off Chris Colbert's kind of recent fucking fall from graces or whatever. Like, he was a highly touted guy, but I've mentioned it before in the pod. There's a documentary that used to be on Netflix called Counterpunch, and it was based around the lives of three guys at different stages of their boxing career. And I would have had like Oscar on it and B-Hop and that. I think it was maybe they were like possibly try to use it to promote fighters that were going to be under their umbrella down the line. But Chris Colbert was one of them. And at the time when he was in the New York Amateurs, he was called Lil B-Hop. So I think it was Chris Colbert, Cam F. Austin, the US amateur heavyweight, and Peter Quill and Kid Chocolate, one of those. It was like the three of them, a documentary on the three of them, but it was showing basically the life that Colbert had in New York, and him having to fucking commute and go on mad train trips just to go training and cover his expenses and living on nothing and getting up at 6 a.m. and all that. And what I'm trying to paint the picture of is that he had a fucking extremely hard life. He had everything against him. He battled against the odds to get to world level and still falls just short with all that kind of, you know, experience on the way up, all those hard knocks on the way up. Campbell Hatton is Ricky Hatton's young fella who's decided he's going to have a fight, and with all that, then he gets the pressure of being Ricky Hatton's young fella, but he also gets the exposure, so he gets opportunities off the second name. Like, we know he's on cards like that he has no right to be on. He's on massive shows, getting massive show experience, but what he's also getting is that social media traction, because these days, like, fame is everything to these kids, isn't it? Like, so if you're on a Sky Saturday Night Show and you're Ricky Hatton's young fella and you're Campbell Hatton and it's Campbell Hatton, how far can he go? And his Insta numbers are going through the roof and that, like, and these guys are kind of getting all the benefits of and rewards that fighters who haven't had the luxury to take the shortcuts rather normally get after a long hard career, and they've earned the right to have it. And these guys are kind of fast tracked to not just opportunities but to better paydays and to more fame, like, and that can be a lot to handle, especially I think if the talent's not there. So I kind of like that the kid is giving it a go. He's taken his loss, but I think from the eye test of what I've seen him, and I've only seen him sparingly, like in on certain undercards when we're covering him for the pod, really, like, I wouldn't be tuning into him on a Saturday night, put it that way. But he's limited. He's very, very limited. And there's guys that I think that are fucking, I'm not exaggerating here and I'm not trying to disparage the guy, like, but there's good white collar guys that'll give him a good night, you know, that way. I think it's going to be very tough for him as he moves up the ranks. And if I was him, if I was Campbell Hatton, or I was the people around Campbell Hatton, I'd be saying, go the Tommy Fury route. Use this exposure to get yourself a fucking influencer match. I don't know, call out fucking, I don't know who the fuck, I Show Speed or someone for a fight. You know, that way, like, just fucking, you'll make a ton of money without having to go down the hard road. Like, and I just don't, I tell whatever about Conor Benn, I think Campbell Hatton is miles off being a decent fighter, and he should probably just make his money and get out. Like,
yeah, I think this guy is basically his level. I mean, and he might beat him, he might not, but this is basically his level until proven differently. And I don't think there's much further that Campbell Hatton's going to be able to go beyond the James Flints of the world. Des, gonna have you give your thoughts on this undercard, but also just, we were talking over the last few weeks about, you're like 12 and 114 journeyman kind of guys. Is Campbell Hatton the kind of guy that those fighters could beat if they decided that they wanted to on one random night?
Yes, is the answer to that, because journeymen have a specific skill set, a specific remit, which is don't take shots to the head, don't get stopped, see out the 4 rounds or the 6 rounds. So most journeymen want to get out twice a month. Some of them get out 3 times a month, and it's been known for some journeymen to get out 5 times a month because the phone rings and you're here to prop up a show. So most journeymen, the remit is not to beat the kid that sells all the tickets. But there's been some really good journeymen that that we've in Britain that we've all looked back on and go, he started as a prospect. He's in the early stage of his career. He was 8-0, 9-0, but then he got beat, and then he just decided to go and get a day job because that paid more money than boxing, and then he come back into boxing just to provide the services of a journeyman. So a lot of journeymen were once prospects. They were talented fighters. A lot of journeymen have got amateur pedigrees, at national level. So, yeah, if you were to put Campbell Hatton against, and in the old day, like an Anthony Hanna, there'd be no doubt about it. Anthony Hanna would stand Campbell Hatton on his head. But that's not because Campbell Hatton is so bad. It's just because somebody journeyman can really fight. I'm picking up on what the boys said. By the way, mate, we have an awful lot of respect for journeymen in this country because we know how much they give and how important they are. And I think James said it brilliantly, that it's a real strange dynamic. He said it a couple of weeks ago, when you try and explain the role of a journeyman to a non-boxing fan. But in boxing, we understand it, but we have an awful lot of respect for journeymen. Campbell Hatton is an interesting one because I'm with Rob, and I think James said it as well. I don't see the sort of potential in Campbell Hatton I saw in Eubank Jr. or Conor Benn in the early stage of their careers. Campbell Hatton doesn't look anything like a boxer. And I think a big part of that is because there's a confusion with Campbell Hatton. Everybody keeps likening him to his dad. And that's really unfair. It's like Paul Dalglish and Kenny Dalglish. That's a football reference, Matty, but that people over here will understand. One was very, very good, like top end, always the top of his class. And the other is very, very mundane and routine. And that's not Campbell's fault. It's just because his dad was exceptionally good. He was an exceptionally good 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old. He was a very good 18-year-old ABA champion. He went to the Worlds and run a Cuban very close, who went on to win the gold medal. Then when he turned pro, Ricky Hatton was just a sensation. Campbell's nowhere near that. But it's been said on this pod, I think Steve mentioned it, when last time Campbell fought with James Flint, and the best comparison you give Campbell Hatton is probably to his uncle Matthew. That's probably where you want to compare Campbell.
Oh, that's offensive to Matthew. He was a good survivor at the top level. I mean, he went 12 rounds with a good number of
correct
of quality operators.
Canelo took a long time to stop him as well, and then he got a certain spurt in strength shortly afterwards.
Correct, right? So at the end of career, Matthew went the distance with Kell Brook, and he'd done well with Canelo, and Matthew won the European title, and Matthew won an area belt. But if you go back to the early phase of Matthew Hatton's career, I think there was a period of time when he got beat by journeyman, and he got beat at area level. And I think he went sometime at one point in his career, he went 2 losses in 3 fights. But he stuck at it. And he wasn't a puncher. He didn't have a particularly high IQ. He didn't have particularly good feet. He wasn't a great athlete.
He didn't have a head of hair whatsoever.
If we're going to be unkind, he was nothing like his brother. And that's pretty similar to Campbell. He's nothing like his dad. So I think the confusion lies with Campbell is we keep comparing him to Ricky, which is probably really unfair to him. But to counter that argument, they have pitched him like he's his new, like the second coming of his father. The music, the outfits, the billing, the shows he's been on. And we've had this conversation on the pod before. If you really wanted Campbell to have a long, lengthy, successful, at a level career, you'd have probably sent him around the country off TV with a promoter like Steve Wood and said, can you get him out 7 or 8 times a year? And let's come back to this in 2 or 3 years' time and see what we've got. But it's been a little bit of a cash grab, and I do understand that. You know, the promoter said we could get him on this show, the network's bought into it, and Ricky Hatton did amazing numbers for Sky. So I can see why networks have sort of jumped on it. All that being said, I think Campbell Hatton is just a very routine area level kid. Last time we saw him box against James Flint, it was a close fight, but I thought Campbell wasn't accurate. He had no punch. He was sort of blinking and pulling away when James Flint was landing. And I think the difference between the two was Campbell was throwing 5 or 6 punches and landing 1, and James Flint was throwing 3 and landing 2. It's 2 kids at area level. I'm not sure how far Campbell goes if he wins this one, but it's about him winning it. I think on the back of James losing his last fight, although it was a close one, and on the back of Campbell now training at the Ben Davison Centre of Excellence, or whatever it's called, with Barry Smith, who's an underrated guy in boxing, I think there's a good chance Campbell can overturn that defeat, but it probably doesn't tell us much about where Campbell's going in his career. I'm a little bit like Rob. If I was in charge of the Campbell Hatton train, I would probably veer him into the Tommy Fury side of things, but that's down to them. Like I don't quite know where Campbell Hatton goes. The one I'm looking forward to is Pat McCormack. I think he's a real talent. That kid can really fight, but I'm a little bit concerned that he might be just another one of those indulged elite amateurs coming off of some elite sports program that's probably got a bit too much profile, a few quid in his pocket, and doesn't really understand that pro boxing is starting again. And he's not been active enough, and they've not kept him busy enough. And it, like Ames said, it's just been stop-start. But Pat McCormack was a Olympic silver medalist. And if you go back the last 7 years, he's won silver or gold at all the major tournaments. He's a very successful amateur and a good fighter. So it'd be nice to see if Pat McCormack can get something going. Reece Bellotti is a standard British level fighter. At one point, he lost 5 in 7, but one of those was Raymond Ford. He had a year out after Raymond, and I think he's still got Jimmy Mack with him. They're getting a go of it. He beat Levi Giles. He beat Liam Dillon. He's a British Commonwealth champion. The Michael Gomez Jr. fight's an interesting one because Michael Gomez has been really busy. He's been active. He's got over 20-odd fights to his name. I think Reece wins that one, but it'll be a good fight. So there you have it, mate.
Right on.
Wait, Matty, just before you jump off, just on Campbell, that switch now to Ben and Barry, it's gonna prove a lot here in this fight, and he definitely should be afforded time to get used to the changes. But now Campbell has to show that he can learn a different style, or learn kind of his own boxing style. When you move to Ben and Barry, I think Barry's the lead as opposed to Ben, but that gym in general, they've got a defined style at the lower weight. So outside of the heavyweight division, you're very much defined in what you do. They've got patterns of the way they're fighting. Of course, they then couple it with the same with the videotapes that they watch of fighters and their research on top of that. But I imagine that they'll have tried to mold Campbell Hatton in the way that they've sort of tweaked Lee Wood or Shabazz Masood as well. When they got Shabazz early, Shabazz showed a lot more when Shabazz was first starting out, and he had more of a flashy type of style, and they really kind of grounded that out of him and made him hold his feet more, made him plant his feet more, and still be agile in his style, but just not as much movement and a lot more sound in his defense. But he's got to show the propensity to be able to learn that style from Ben and then execute it on the night. But what he's got in his favor is on his doorstep. He's got sparring with Lee Wood, with Shabazz Masood, McCormack's, Royston Barney-Smith, Jordan Gill. So much talent in that gym that if it's for you, if you're going to succeed, you've got to show that you've improved now. There's no excuses. I'm not saying that this was the case here, but you're away from family now, and where sometimes family can be a little bit more softer on you, and your kid growing up and you've always been your father's son, you kind of get treated a little bit differently. You kind of, you maybe don't get kind of the harsh reality of things kind of drawn out to you. But now you've got that because of the talent that you've got in front of you. There'll be no niceness, I imagine, about Campbell as to where he is and what he's got to do. And so he's got to show that now, because I think if he doesn't do that in this fight and show those improvements and turn around this victory, like, it's just more stones to throw at him. But I think he will. I think he will improve.
Yeah, Ames, I think he'll show an improvement, because I think Barry Smith's a better trainer than Matthew Hatton. But strong, hard sparring, particularly 3 or 4 times a week, can empty a kid as well. So if Campbell's not geared up for that, it may have emptied him.
Man, I can't believe that we spent 20 minutes on Campbell Hatton. This is the hardcore shit right here, ladies and gentlemen. Anyhow.
Sound like the fucking DAZN head of programming there, Matty.
I'm telling you. Yeah. That's my calling. If Steve can get a real job from this, why can't I? Why can't I? Anyhow. Oh yeah, because he's talented. Anyhow.
Well, we have another 20 minutes if you want.
he's talented. He can pronounce fighters' names. He's everything. Where's Steve? Bring back Steve.
Anyhow. So that's all before the main event, which is Jack Catterall against Regis Prograis. This is a fight, Rob, where I have a hunch this one could be a very bad fight, a very boring fight, because in the last 2 fights you had guys who kind of worked the perimeter and they just made Prograis miss when he threw, and they brought his work rate down. One of those fights he won just by the skin of his teeth against Danilito Zaria. And these are all things, slowing down the fight, kind of working around the ring, landing single shots, and not getting hit on the comeback. These are all things that Jack Catterall can do well. And I could just see this being a very boring 12-round fight.
Yeah, and I don't think this is an easy out for Jack Catterall. I think if he wins this easy, he's making a bit of a statement. I think we may have seen the best of Prograis, but at Prograis' best, he's a good fighter, man. He gave Josh Taylor a very close fight, and he's shown that he could do stuff down the line or whatever. A lot of people thought he might give Tiafimo a bit of problems, but didn't work out like that. But I still think it's a tough fight for Catterall. He hasn't got that come forward, I'm headhunter style, where he's going to go and fucking try to put an exclamation point on fights. You can go nip and tuck with him at various points in the fight. He's very clean with his work. Very sharp counter puncher. Likes to have the last say. I think it's a dangerous fight for. I think it's a fight that he could look bad in, and it's at a stage of his career where he's probably looking for bigger things. So he needs to win and win well, I'd say, to keep himself in the frame for big paydays. But I don't think it's easy. I think it'll be nip and tuck fight. I think it'll be probably 7-5 Catterall, something like that.
That's interesting that you think it might be that close of a fight, because that's, I mean, it's a fight where the odds aren't super wide, but Catterall is definitely a market favorite. I think Prograis might be paying like upwards of 3 to 1.
I mean, you don't want to have an off night against Prograis. I might sound like a George Foreman there, where I'm giving the fucking complete fucking opposite take in a way that's so confident that you believe it. But I honestly think that I think there's room for error. If you make mistakes against Prograis, it's going to be hard to get off on him, that way. Like, I think he's very skilled and talented fighter. He definitely has something about him. I don't think he's just a knockover fight for Catterall at this stage. I expect it to be nip and tuck. But like I said, I think Catterall will win the decision probably 116, 112, 115, 113, something like this.
Yeah, that'd be a closer fight than I'm kind of expecting. I would like it to be that competitive, even if it's not necessarily entertaining. I would at least like there to be a little bit of drama going into the final bell. James, it's a battle of two southpaws here. Not going to see that very often, but we all know that Catterall has skill against his fellow lefties. How do you think this is going to go? Any surprises in store?
I'm similar to you, Matty, in that I feel like it's got the potential to be a little bit of a boring fight, but I'm hopeful that because they're both decent body punchers and they both like to wing big lefts over the top every now and again, I'm hoping that can like kind of ignite the contest a little bit. But because Catterall's so, I wouldn't say he's conservative, but he's very considered. Like, he's not about wasting punches. He's not a volume guy. I think he looks for his opening and he shoots for it conclusively. I think Prograis is a little bit more reckless, a little bit more unconventional, but I think he probably hits a little bit harder. And when you look at Prograis' record, it's like, okay, you lost to Haney. Haney, say what you want about him. I thought Haney was going to stand Ryan Garcia on his head, no problem, and then look what happened there. But if you take his run since the Linares fight, Haney was he was the guy, wasn't he? So I don't really consider a loss to Haney to be any shame whatsoever. And I don't think it took a lot out of him, but it's just like age and inactivity. Like, the mismanagement is another theme of the show. Like, after the Josh Taylor fight, there was a lot of long layoffs and random opponents where you're thinking you probably should try and maintain your momentum when you're in your athletic prime. Now, that prime's probably left him, probably just left him. And it's a matter of whether Catterall can take advantage of that. But at the same time, like, if Catterall wins this, that's at least on par with the Josh Taylor win. Like, no problem for me. It might be, potentially even better, because I feel like Josh Taylor, again, he's took a dramatic dip in the past couple of years. But yeah, it's at least on par with it. I'm hoping it'll be exciting, but it is hope, really. And as for a prediction, kind of like Catterall. I think he might stop him if he does win. I think he might stop him, but only because of that decisive punching. I feel like he could catch him on a wild one, but it's nip and tuck, man. It could go either way, really.
Yeah, I mean, when Devin Haney's dropping you, maybe your chin's starting to go. I don't think you're that out of bounds when you kind of look at the whole picture, the inactivity of Prograis, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see here. Where would we want to go on? Let's see here. Ames, what's your take on this fight? I kind of feel like the path to victory when you're going against a guy like Catterall, who's a counter puncher, just wants to slow down the pace. You got to make him work harder than he wants to work. You have to make them up their work rate and test that motor. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think the loss against Devin Haney, although it's at the highest level you can get in the sport, the concern for me was the way Regis was reacting to the shots. The concern for me, the way he moved, the way his body moved and didn't move in the fight. And he looked like a fighter who definitely has lost a step or two in the ring against a high-level operator like Devin Haney. It makes that step that you've lost even greater and even more visible. And Jack's got a similar sort of jab-heavy type of style, looking to counter off of you and looking to find the openings in you and you to lead, and then him to counter off of that. And I think it might not be conducive to Prograis getting stopped, but it's going to be conducive to Prograis not having a lot of success in the fight, and not a fight where you kind of look at, oh, maybe he should be stopped here, or the corner should look at throwing in the towel, but just minimal success from a Prograis perspective here, because I just think Prograis going through his career won't have fought many styles like a Haney or a Catterall, a real a neutralizer, diffuser, real awkward and just real passive in a fight. And then when you get to that level, or when you get to that style of fight, it really kind of shows that you haven't had those experiences. And what Prograis needs is for you to come in and try and dog with him, and him to then try and outdog you. And then in those points where Catterall does hold his feet and does choose to throw, he's got that dog in them as well. He showed that in both the Taylor fights where Josh was trying to put it on him. And they throw it a similar. I'd probably say Taylor and Prograis probably throw just as hard of a punch here. So I think Catterall is getting Prograis at the right time, and I think he could stop him, but I don't think he will. I think it'll be close, but I don't think Catterall will just quite get it. But I think he's getting Prograis right at the right time, and he's going to look really good in this fight. But the truth is he's in against someone who's not at the complete of his powers.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Des, if there was a fight where it really just set up a lot of alarms for me. It wasn't even necessarily the Haney fight, but I mean, Ames made a lot of good points about the way that Prograis looked in that fight. But before that, against Danilito Zorrilla, a fight where many people thought that he lost that one, it wasn't just that Zorrilla, who is normally a come forward fighter, just boxed him on the perimeter. It's the fact that Prograis, a southpaw, couldn't figure out how to deal with Zorrilla, who was moving to his own right into the left hand of Prograis, and he kept shooting the jab and missing outside. And it was just unbelievable to me how his IQ in that fight, a fighter who had done so well at such a high level, where his boxing IQ does, it was just totally exposed in that fight.
Yeah, and Regis couldn't close that gap against Zorrilla. He couldn't find a way of closing that distance between his backhand and where Zorrilla was standing. And he got away with one that night. I think Josh Taylor's best performance was against Regis Prograis, and I think that was Regis Prograis' best performance as well. I fell in love with both of them kids that night. I thought it was a brilliant fight, but it was 5 years ago, and I'm not sure if we've seen a better version of Regis Prograis since Josh Taylor, and I think a lot of us are dining off that. The Devin Haney one is a red flag for me, because I thought Devin Haney was solid and sound, and dropping Regis kind of suggests what I thought. Maybe Regis is getting to that stage in his career now where he doesn't want hard fights, and a hard fight might find him out. I don't think he's going to have an exceptionally hard fight, physically grueling fight with Jack Catterall, but I think Jack knows how to switch him off, and it'd be two southpaws, and Jack can be a stinkinator. And although I enjoyed the last Josh Taylor fight, and I thought Jack in that fight was very proactive at times, I think it's his default setting to sort of sit behind a long southpaw jab and use that jab to counter. Regis will try and score, but I think Jack will find him with a counter jab, and I think it's going to be a slow fight, and I think he's going to switch Regis off by about 4 or 5, and it'll be a slow walk to the final bell. I think Jack wins it. When Jack came through the Josh Taylor fight and there was all these names being talked about, I thought the safe bet was Regis Prograis, and I still think it's a safe bet. I think Regis gets beat on points, Jack wins. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a very exciting fight, and I think we've probably seen the best of Regis Prograis.
Yeah, I think he's 35 now, and he just hasn't had a good performance since he beat Jose Zepeda, and God knows how much Zepeda had at that point in time. He's been on quite the decline of his own.
Zepeda has been on the down as well, and we've seen him get fed to Dalton Smith, who you could argue is just above domestic level. And like I say, we all remember Regis from that Josh Taylor night, which was brilliant. He was fantastic that night. But since then, which has been 5 years, he's been in movies and he's earned a few quid and he's bought a few houses and he's bought a few motors and he's lived a certain life and he's travelled around. And we're not going to see that version of Regis Prograis. I think Regis Prograis was a very safe pick. It's a good pick because he's very familiar with us over here. But I think it's a Jack Catterall win on points.
Yeah, that would be my hunch. That's probably where most of the money's going. But I don't dismiss James's idea that he can't hold a punch anymore, and because who knows on that end, he could get stopped very well, or maybe he's just had it. And but we'll find out. I think there's the doubts in Prograis are definitely enough to make it so that most of the people are going to feel good on who wins, but I don't know about how they win it. So yeah, that's look good. We did not mention William Skull picking up a belt at 168, or he might have kept his belt against Vladimir Shishkin. It was supposed to be a very close fight. I'm going to try to watch that one this week. But yeah, it has been a fantastic episode. Next week, Ames is actually going to be here in the hot seat hosting, and he will review that as well as look forward.
I am.
What's that?
I am.
You did. You said so.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah. See, they mess with me, people. They try to make me think I'm crazier than I actually am, which is a lot, which would be a lot going on there. I don't know if I could handle that. So, but anyhow, so Ames is going to be stepping in there, and he'll be reviewing this fight, previewing what's going on in the next week. And then I will be back around after that. November's not looking too bad. December is not looking terrible either. I think there's some decent 50-50 fights that are coming up, even if they aren't some of the biggest fights on the schedule. Richardson Hitchens against Liam Perro. That's a near 50-50 fight with the books. That one's kind of interesting at 140 pounds coming up here in a handful of weeks, I believe. So a lot headed your way, folks. But I would like to thank James, Dez, Rob, and Mr. Eamon Khan from Seconds Out for joining us.
Sexing out.
Dude, I just need to start the site. I mean, might as well. What the hell? I don't know what it'd be about, but anyways, we have a framework. But anyways, I'd like to thank everyone. Remember,
Patreon will be late on that one.
Amen. Speaking of Patreon, patreon.com/Boxing Asylum. There's plenty of boxing to be had there. Not a lot of sex. Sorry about that, folks. But we will see.
For you, maybe.
Damn it. Yeah, I haven't tried using it as a dating group. Fuck. And anyhow, I don't know if I want to.
You put a pitch out into the WhatsApp group, didn't you, the other day?
What did I do?
You put the fishing rod out in the WhatsApp group the other day, didn't you, with the picture?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Looking good with my nice shaven face. Yeah.
Smooth operator, you.
Sexy, and I know it, everybody. Yeah, that's me. But anyhow, it's been a good time. Thank Rob for jumping in as well. We've had a good time with you folks. But yeah, next week we'll be back. See what was happening on that card. See if Bilotti and Gomez did ultimately entertain. But until then, I've been your host, Matt DiGianardo, and you folks have a great week ahead. We'll see you next time.
We'll never forget.
I think that's good happening.
Go to Adam move! We want to be honest, yeah?
Crying like a little bitch. I've never met a fucking swank that can fight me.
I fell asleep.
You're a fucking bum, you're a fucking asshole.
Rumple fucking Stiltskin.
But allegedly, Oscar Rivas has failed a test.
7-year ain't it? 7-year ain't it? I will fucking smash fucking you.
I hope you fucking die.
Be safe.
I love Boxing Asylum. It's as simple as that.